We have with us members of the council as well as directors of the various departments that are here. Before I turn this over to the staff to work their way through this, I want to begin by thanking a lot of people. This presentation this evening has taken a lot of work from the staff, from the city manager, from the directors, but we also have to thank the IT folks who managed to put this together, and that's Steve Bader, who is here, and Jonathan, who has, I believe, helped you, who may not be here this evening. And we certainly need to thank Katie Nakazano and Jen Conrad for their work this evening also in getting us to this point. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Marie, which I believe you're going to begin the session this evening.
I am. Thank you so much. And you took some of my opening, but definitely thanking staff and IT. Doing this, while it is imperfect, it was no easy feat in terms of setting it up and the technology. And Steve and Jonathan have done a terrific job. So really thank you for that. And thank you for staying this evening. Jennifer and Katie have just been terrific, as they always are. And of course, all of the directors and staff. And it's been really neat to see everything come together. So with that, we'll get, and I should introduce Eric Peterson. I hope we do have some members of the public watching as well as others, but Eric Peterson is a new assistant city manager. And so today was his first day. What a day to join us. And so welcome, Eric. Okay. And Mara, thank you so much for driving the presentations for us. All right. So we've got our introductory agenda. You can go ahead and go to the next one, Mara. So I've just got the order of how the departments are going to present, and they're the same way that were in your budget book. There was no magic to selecting them, but we'll have police, fire, public works, parks and recreation, and then planning and development, as well as time for council questions and discussion, and then of course council recommendations. And not to say that there won't be discussion all the way through, but definitely some designated time blocks for it as well. So I will start by sharing that the FY22 budget is not ideal. And this is not a budget that any city manager would want to bring forth, let alone a new city manager, but it is the budget we have. And it's not ideal because it's not balanced. And regardless of the decisions that council may make tonight, and I know those decisions will be very hard to come by, but no matter what decisions are made, it still won't be balanced. And that is largely due to the pandemic shortfalls. And so we'll talk about that as we go through the presentations. And Marlene, who I failed to thank in my opening, but I'll have many times tonight to thank her because she's going to share some of the revenue numbers with you, the expenditure numbers, some of the charts, and really get into the data with you. So I appreciate that. But we'll be able to see how the pandemic has taken a toll, not just on the upcoming fiscal year 22, but how it has taken a toll since it started towards the end of fiscal year 20. And so while sales, revenues, taxes, which is where we get most of our general fund revenue from, is looking good, it's going to take time to work its way back to where we were. So I do want to share that. Aside from the pandemic and the lagging economy, however, there are organizational decisions from the past that have also played a part into where we are today. And, you know, certainly people did not have a crystal ball historically, but things such as not investing in technology really made wading through the pandemic even harder. And so staff have done a remarkable job. So we'll dig into that as well. So I'm very proud of the budget work that we've done, even though it is not an ideal budget. It is a neat body of work that we have worked really hard. I do want to address inaccuracies in the budget book real quickly, and Marlene can share more as we move forward. You want to get to just the agenda. There you go. Anyway, that's perfect. That's perfect. So as many of you have emailed, asked questions, and I appreciate it. Keep the questions coming. There are inaccuracies in the budget book. A lot of that has to do with the manual entry that is needed to be done. And that gets back to the technology investments that I've talked about. The bottom line numbers are solid. We're confident in those, but there is a lot of work that goes into manually transferring it. Marlene was going to share more, but a lot of it is a cut and paste. And so what you're seeing are numbers that were inaccurate from years ago that unfortunately were carried carried over. And as we're digging deeper into it, we're going to continue fixing and revising those as we move forward. So Marlene, I don't know if now you want to share before I move forward and just kind of give a couple of examples.
Okay, I was going to talk about when we built the book or whatever, the detail pages and the summary pages. What we do is we utilize the templates from prior years. And then we take those and the 2019 actual data, we actually copy from the previous year into those templates for the new ones. And then we go into our software system, which is New World ERP, and we run a report and we convert it into Excel and we manipulate it a little bit. And then we copy and paste into these templates on every single page that's in this budget. So it's very time consuming. And there is a budget module that belongs to the software system that we've had, but in the past, it's always gotten thrown out because it was too expensive for the budget. But that might help us with some of the time constraints and stuff that goes into it. But then again, it's another item for the budget type of thing. But it would make it progress it easier. It would give us the tools to quickly reevaluate things differently. Maybe say we want this percentage rate in salaries. It can immediately do those calculations and things for us instead of taking like a day to manipulate spreadsheets and get information to you guys. It has been, it's the best we could do for now. And that's what I've got.
Thank you. So you may have noticed there are a couple new things in this year's budget book. There's the annual plan. And so I really appreciate the directors bearing with me and being willing to address those things in the annual plan. I felt that was important because it took a look at how COVID has impacted each of the departments. And they are the subject matter experts. They know that far better than what I could share. And so it was really meant to give just a glance, as well as talk about what's on the horizon for the departments, what the department's vision is. So I wanted to share those things. And then the department directors will be presenting their own budgets to you this year as well, in addition to the items you've seen in the budget book. And again, that's because they are the subject matter experts, and who better to tell the story and for you all to ask questions of and to engage in a dialogue with them. So if there's any year, oh, I'm sorry, if you go back to the book, that's all right. We're going to get through it. So if there's any year to have budget principles, it's this year. And so I wanted to share what some of my budget principles were in terms of putting this together. And that certainly is that local governments are service organizations. And as such, we value our employees as the backbone of the organization. A large part of any of our expenditures go to employees because they're the ones providing the services. We are not selling widgets for the most part. We have people. And without people, we could not do the job. Historical precedent should not determine future spending. I think that may be one of the most critical. We should always avoid last year's budget should be this year's budget and just simply doing things the way that we have. Spending must be relevant to the organization and to community needs, and we have to be willing to assess those as time moves on. A budget is a roadmap. It is the fiscal guide, but it also demonstrates organizational values. And I think this year we are showing our values in many ways by continuing to pursue diversity, equity, and inclusion. Even though it is a tougher budget year, we're not letting those initiatives go to the wayside, as well as looking at compensation and classification initiatives as investments in current employees, future employees, and the community. So wanted to share those items. And then, so the next slide shares some of the pandemic takeaways, and you'll hear more about this certainly from the department directors. But I wanted to share this as well because it's crucial to understand how the start of the pandemic at the end of FY20 is still impacting us. So the organization as an entity was not nimble or set up to be responsive to the pandemic. It just wasn't. However, the people were, and that's what matters. The people have created so many different workarounds, and by the people, the staff. The staff have continued delivering a service throughout the pandemic without having laptops, systems that talk to each other, without having cameras. I mean, the fact that we're here doing this on Zoom with one camera in the room, and again, people are innovative. They want to do things differently, but the organization in many ways has been stagnant. So it's amazing. And I think that's a real tribute to the staff, if you will, that things have carried on and not just carried on status quo. Amazing things have been done. First responder and public safety services were fully functional. That's not true of all cities. It is certainly true of this of Webster Groves. Things have been terrific. So a huge kudos to all the departments, but definitely a special acknowledgement to police and fire and the services that were able to continue. So what you see there is that significant budget reductions were made in May and June of FY20 and about $280,000. That may not seem like much, but when you're talking about at the end of the fiscal year and cutting that much out of your budget within the last 2 months, it's significant. And where those items really hit, there's more things. That's not an all-inclusive list, but are the items you see there. Parks and recreation, there was part-time salaries, facilities were closed, trainings, conferences were cut out, supplies, a lot of equipment. And so those reductions really helped. However, carrying on into the FY21 budget, which was not balanced either, it's just continued to have a ripple effect, if you will, and we're still feeling it. So just wanted to share that. So where do we go from here? One of my primary principles will be investments in infrastructure, which equals a return on investment, not only for staff, but for residents. And so as we continue to build those, transitions from outdated legacy systems to Microsoft Exchange adds flexibility and functionality. Thanks to this council, a lot of those things that are already there were approved in the FY21 budget. So what you'll see in the FY22 budget is just the carry through of the maintenance cost for those different contracts. And those things are not in place yet. The IT team, Steve and Jonathan, have been terrific. They're working with Microsoft and others, and the delay is not ours. It's just in terms of getting on schedules, working out migration. So we'll continue to bring you updates on those. Department director laptops, to imagine that they were functioning in the COVID environment without having these items, iPads for the fields. So again, investing in infrastructure creates efficiencies, and it also has a large return on investment for our community. Phone systems, that's certainly a future solution as we move forward, but we still have basic desk phones, landlines. We don't have, VoP systems, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of improvements still being made that is not built into this budget, but will be part of the long-term strategic plan. Okay, in terms of budget highlights, unfortunately, and we're not alone in this, but health insurance rates have increased, and they've increased quite a bit by 4.5%. That's not one of the things that we can influence in the budget. The city offers 4 levels of insurance, and you see those 4 levels there, and apologize, it feels like I'm reading, but I hope we do have a few viewers. So I want to make sure they can, since they may not be able to see the screen, I want to make sure I'm sharing the information. But we have single, employee and spouse, employee and child, and family coverage. And what those increases amount to there, for example, employee and spouse is about a $200 increase annually. Employee with a child or children is about $142 annually. And then of course, the largest cost is the family coverage, which is at $316 annually. The numbers you see there in bold are what it costs in totality for those insurance packages for employees. Cost of living adjustment is built into the budget at a proposed 2% pay increase for city employees effective July 1. The all city items consumer price index for all urban consumer increase for the 12-month ending March of 2021, which is the standard of really how you compare, was 2.6 compared to 1.5% in March of 2020. So the 2% increase, that also is something that's been, as far as I could look back and tell, and I've asked Marlene as well, it's always been built in. Now, always doesn't mean that it always has to continue to be. Again, budgets need to be living documents, but that was built into this one, as well as the merit increase of 1.5% that is traditionally earned in on January 1st, of the year. I put in historical practice in italics because, again, that is perhaps an area that can be influenced, and not to say that employees aren't deserving of it, because I think they are deserving of it. But there's some flexibility there in terms of we're doing the comp and classification study, as you all know. That RFP ended April 30th. They're being out for bid ended. We got 7 responses back. They have not yet been rated or evaluated. But one item might be in terms of holding off on that 1.5% increase and putting the saved dollars towards the recommendations that come out of the study. So food for thought. Marlene has ran some budget scenarios she can share with you later, and if interested, on what the cost savings would be there that we could then reinvest back in employees at a later date if that were a strategy the council is interested in. All right, so some additional budget highlights. The Director of Public Affairs and Community Engagement was approved, and Building Inspector was approved in FY21. So what you'll see in FY22 are the ongoing budgeting cost. FY21-22 technology, I already touched on that somewhat, but this council approved migration from legacy technology systems to Office 365. So what you'll see in the continued budget is the maintenance for those items. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. That first year was also taken out of FY21. What you have budgeted in FY22 is a proposed allocation of $40,000. As my notes say there, this could be less and it could be delayed depending on how quickly we get through the first phase. What I want to share is that if it's delayed or if it's not done in FY22, that does not mean that it's not a priority. I want to be, and I know you all want to be as well, thoughtful and meaningful as we go through the work. I don't want to rush it just because it's on a calendar year. So that number could be very flexible depending on how long it takes to do the work, depending on staff schedules and just the feel of the work. Employee compensation and classification study. I already shared that. There is a proposed budget allocation of $30,000 to implement recommendations made from the study. That literally was just a placeholder. There's not a way to know what the recommendations will come back at. What we know is that cities across the nation engage in these studies about every 3 to 5 years, and we've never had one. So this really is going to be our baseline opportunity to see what that is. And I was in one of the city manager meetings with all of the fellow cities and was able to get a good baseline from what they've seen of it. And it was interesting. And I won't share which city, but the city with the oldest comp and class study had theirs done 7 years ago, and they were feeling like they were already behind. So this is really something that as we reinvest in employees and look at things and keeping up with not just market trends, but equity between salaries. That's something really important to continue building in. So that 30,000 again is just a marker. And it's also not to say, for people watching that whatever the recommendations are, it doesn't mean that those have to be rolled into one fiscal year. Typically, you take a long-term approach to look at what you can do over the course of a few years to get back to where things should be. Fines and fees. Revenue from municipal court fines has trended downward over the past couple of years. Socially, those tend to be the trends we want to see instead of just having fines for individuals. Yet revenue for FY22 is expected to be significantly higher than revenues in FY21, which sounds a little counterintuitive, but the explanation for what we think will be an increase is that because the courts have been closed for so long and they will be reopening, there is a backlog of cases. However, there may not be fines assessed. So that one is, again, a little bit of a, we'll wait and see. If there are an increase in revenues, it's likely not sustainable as justice practices continue to evolve. You will see only one new position requested in the FY22 budget, and that position is a full-time permit technician for the Planning and Development Department. And Mara, that position's been requested for a couple of years, but taken out of the budget 2 years due to cost. The need has not went away. So budget priorities and challenges. Budget priorities: diversity, equity, and inclusion; compensation and classification study; technology. And then budget challenges. That certainly is not an all-inclusive list, but the challenges continue to be the recreation complex was closed for the fourth quarter of FY20, go back open in 21. It's been very low occupancy levels due to the continued pandemic. We rely on that in the general fund budget quite a bit on parks and recreation. So that also has a continued ripple effect. City Hall building infrastructure, which you had a presentation on recently. Anticipated and unanticipated retirements. I don't know if that's an area that's been given a lot of thought. That also goes into the comp and classification study in terms of how we onboard people, how we're recruiting. But we enjoy a workforce that has worked here for a lot of years. And those individuals, I presume, will want to retire at some point in time. It is incredibly remarkable that 25% of the workforce has been here 20 plus years. It's a lot. It says a lot about the organization, but it also says a lot about how we have to plan for the future, because not only does that mean we'll be losing staff to retirement, it also means that we'll have several large payouts as people retire. And so those have to be built into the budget as well. And as I presented to you, I believe it was back in April, this is the first year of both fire and police step increases, which are incredibly well-intentioned, well-needed. However, there was not a long-term plan for the impact. And so this is the first year that both of those will be hitting us. And as I already talked about, the increases in healthcare.
So,
Please.
Marie, there's a double negative there, and I just want to make sure I understand.
It's a typo.
Okay, so it was not planned. And I just want to make sure that's clear, especially for the constituents as we go
Yes.
forward.
Yes, no, that unfortunately was not planned. So again, budget highlights, revenues and expenditures are not balanced in the budget. Sorry, I lost my pack. Even with the budget shortfall, we will still expect to have 8.4 million in reserve general revenue. So that speaks well to where we're at. The city of Webster Groves will receive an estimated 4.2 million from the President's American Rescue Plan funding. That funding has not been plugged into the budget at all. And people at home may be asking, well, why? And that's because we don't have it yet. And so you do not plug money into the budget, just like you would into home and your into your household bills that have not been realized. So that does give us some opportunity. And then my last comment on this slide is that revenue estimates are not scientific, and to err on the side of caution, the estimates for FY22 were incredibly conservative. Across the nation, we're seeing increased revenues. I hope that's what we'll see as well, and I think it is, but they are conservative. I am going to ask Eric to share a couple of comments that weren't scripted, but he's got some American Rescue Plan funding updates for you that I believe the guidance was released yesterday.
So as long as we don't go back in a pandemic.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you. It's good to be here on my first day. Wouldn't be the first time I started a job right into the budget, but it's good to be with you. The Treasury has released its initial guidance on the American Rescue Plan yesterday. I don't know if the League of Cities news reached you. The initial fact sheet, along with the interim first rule, it's called, which is about 150 pages. I'll email out to you all. It says a lot of things that are in the law, but not much more than what's in the law already. So the guidance is not very helpful on the full list of eligible or excluded expenditures. There is a very nice, however, about 18-page FAQ, which does go into a lot of examples that can help us frame our thought about potential expenditures under the ARP plan. With that, again, the numbers were reconfirmed that Missouri will see about 450 million to the non-entitlement units. That is us, the small units of government. And we expect to be about 4.2 million as we have previously estimated. What is important to note in the FAQ and in the guidance that has been released is the state cannot add any further restrictions to the funding from the Treasury than be any more restrictive than the US Treasury is. So they are simply a pass-through agency. And once they receive the money, they must deposit it with us in 30 days. We do not have to make any request to the Treasury other than to have our DUNS number, which we have. The state must do its request to receive its funding as a direct allocation and then provide for us that funding again within 30 days. So we obviously will stay on top of guidance and potential eligible uses, but as you think of both our reserves and our fund balances and then the ARP, we'll need to balance the uses of those and what color of money, to use that term, we're going to put towards what uses, whether it be community, external, internal resources, infrastructure and technology, all those kinds of questions. So that's my brief update. I'd be happy to answer questions throughout the night as you have.
So the money is going to be funneled through the state, not the county?
It will go through the state. It'll go through the state, yes. So the state, I don't know if they're going to be going to the county or not. Mara?
If you want to repeat it again into the microphone, if you don't talk to the microphone, the public can't hear your question.
Sure, I was just asking, so like, I think the last round of stimulus came through the county.
Correct.
And
So-
this one's coming through the state.
It'll come through the state. So the law was written directly that the state must provide, the federal law was written in a way that the state must provide those payments to us non-entitlement units. So
Wonderful.
Thank you. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it to Marlene to share some of the budget numbers. Marlene?
Okay. Slide is up. I want to first start out with where we've come from. This has revenues and expenditures for 18, 19, and 20. And it shows that 20, there was a deficit. Our revenues were less than our expenditures. A lot of that was because the pool didn't open in May of 20. The municipal court was basically shut down completely. And the online court didn't start until into fiscal 21.
Are the CARES Act, is CARES Act money in there as revenue or?
For FY 20, there was one payment of CARES Act money that would have been in with the revenues. So it did have a portion of it in there.
Was it CARES or FEMA?
It was CARES.
This is CARES. Okay.
It was CARES. Actually, there was one of the FEMAs, I believe, hit in 20 also, and one of the FEMAs hit in
Really
21.
small.
It was really small, very small FEMA. Okay, the next one is taking us to fiscal year 21. Here we have in the middle highlighted ones. You can see the total revenues with CARES in it. And then down at the bottom, if those CARES funds had not hit in 21, it would have been really, really bad. But basically, the shortfalls related to utility taxes, the fines, which was the courts that we were talking about, and then the parks and recreation with people just not coming and being closed down. So that's that one.
Marlene, so
Yes.
on that one, thank you.
Go back to
Again, as I pointed out before, and to make sure I say it right, but with the FY 21 actuals where we're at now with the expenditures, we are still on track, or excuse me, the estimates to be $1 million lower than the amended budget. And that goes to the department directors in terms of spending. I mean, we're being very careful. They have been very careful. Their staff have been very careful. And so what's still more expenditures than we would like. To say that it's $1 million less was not an easy accomplishment. So that's worth noting.
Okay, and then this one. This one you will see with the fiscal year 21 estimates. Where the expenditures were like Dr. Peoples was saying, the 21s are quite a bit less than what was budgeted. And that's because the staff and everybody has chunked down and really tried to make it work that they could. The proposed budget includes some of the things that we've mentioned already. The healthcare costs are increased by 4.5%. Professional services are increased by 130,000. This is related to the comp and class study and other items. The employee annual 2% with the fire and police steps. It's highlighted here. The amounts that are here are the ones of where we transferred money from the Prop P stuff into the general fund. So that shows where the steps were hitting. Any questions there?
Is that then a budget deficit proposed for the coming year of 2.2 billion?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So then can you explain to me how much, I'm a little confused by the first year's fire and police steps, how much that is going to cost the city regardless of any deficit?
The salaries that were higher that year, they're still higher this year. So it's a perpetual thing from year to year of the increased salaries.
So is the difference roughly an additional 865,000 or 867,000 this year?
Do you need that printout of what you did for me earlier?
Not sure. I'm not sure what you're asking.
So what's the difference because of this, the step ups? How much more money does the city allocate this coming year for FY 22 for police and fire budgets?
How much is the steps?
Yeah, so like how much more, well, what's the additional expenditures that is necessary in order to meet the first year steps for fire and police in the FY 22 draft budget?
Okay, I do not have that number right here. I can get it for you, but I don't have it right here.
Yeah, and I'm hoping when we get to the police and fire budgets, we can look at that fairly closely because I was kind of tracking the year-to-year percentage increase, and I have a couple of questions there about how this is different from what I see here.
Gotcha.
Well, and I guess just for future discussion, we look at the difference between 20 to 21 at that $500,000 level, 21 to 22, it's more than twice that. What's it gonna look like from 22 to 23? And how will that be sustainable for us? Because, what we do now will influence that, and, we're digging ourselves a big hole here, I guess is my fear. And I know you can't tell me that off the top of your head, and I'm not asking that, so.
That's
But-
part, I'm sorry.
But it is something I think we need to consider.
That's part of making sure we have like a longer term.
That's where we've got to do
scope
the
going out.
forecasting of the 5 years out. And that 1.2, I mean, it does also include the 2% for all staff. The majority is the step increases, but it does include the 2% for all staff. And it also includes those payouts of the 3 anticipated retirements.
What's the duration of, well, maybe I should wait for Dale, in terms of the duration of the steps, how many years are we doing this, the step portion?
Let's wait till they go.
And can you then explain the payout process? Because that seems to be something here that we keep talking about. I don't understand what this payout is.
Sure.
When someone retires, if they have accumulated vacation, we pay out the vacation that they have accumulated. We pay out comp time they have accumulated. And if they are retiring and they have sick pay accumulated, if they've been here more than 10 years, we pay out 25% of the sick pay. And if they've been here 20 years, we pay out 50% of the sick pay.
So typically, what would that amount to for an employee? Is it $1,000 or $25,000?
It varies by employee, but I've seen it close to 25,000.
It's quite a bit.
Wow.
And so when we think about 25% of our workforce having over 20 years and the amount of time accumulated, those could be very large payouts that we have to plan for.
And is that still the case for any new employee currently hired today?
In terms of how they accrue time.
Yeah, so for instance, say 20 years from today, they've been here for all 20 years and they require retirement. Would they be entitled to the exact same thing as a current employee who has 20 plus years of service currently?
So yes, and that is part of the policies. So I know I keep saying comp and clam, but that the RFP, part of what that RFP deliverable was to look at all of our HR policies. And that is some decisions that council is going to have to make. How do we want, and I'm not asking for those decisions tonight, but how do we want to approach it? Because I will say that our HR policies are incredibly generous, which says something. It says something about how we value staff. But it also is a little outdated in terms of how the payout approaches are or the accumulation times are in terms of how government works today.
Yeah.
I will say also, there is a cap on how much vacation you can accrue. If you have over a certain amount on December 31st, you can lose your vacation every year if you don't use it. There's only so much you can accrue. And the same on the sick leave. There is a total max on sick leave. So we have a number of people that no longer accrue sick leave because they're at the max. It just stays there. So it's not one of those things that keeps going forever, but there are quite a bit of
Still very
numbers
generous.
that get up in there.
So we will probably have a whole work session on this when we get to that point.
You know, similarly, has the employer contribution for retirement changed at all for new employees versus a 20 plus year service employee?
I don't, know. It's a good question.
The loggers we have is the first 6 months you're here, you don't pay into it. And then after that, it's at 4% for all employees.
Gotcha, all right.
So we should be clear that this 1.2 is not all police and fire. It's police,
It's
fire,
everybody.
everybody's compensation payouts, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought so.
Okay, the next one has got some fund balance comparisons. And it just has the balances from the general fund, the capital fund, the park improvement, street improvement, and the public safety sales. And it just shows you over the years that for 2021, they're all going down from what they were last year. And that's kind of what you get when you have a non-balanced budget.
That is going to be tonight's takeaway.
It's the balances are there. All right. The next one is the revenues of all funds for the 22 proposed budget. Our largest source of revenue is the sales tax, and sales tax can be unpredictable. This year, it's been pretty good. It kind of surprised us. But you don't know what's going to hit next year, and with online sales and various things, it's an unknown. The next highest is the property tax, and then we have the utility taxes. Intergovernment revenue, that's things that come to us from other governments, like cigarette tax, gas tax, road and bridge, those types of things. And then the others are all smaller percentages. We then have the expenditures of all funds. And this is broken down by the departments. You will notice there is a very large percent. Well, no, this is all of them. You've got public safety, police and fire are large. Public works is large. And you don't think so much of people, but the projects that public works does are bigger dollar items. So that's how come ends up with a higher percentage. The next one we have is related to the general fund. It is the revenue. And it's basically reflective of some of the total funds. And the next one is the general fund expenditures. One thing you might notice on this one is finance is a very large number. And the reason finance has a large number, a lot larger than it did last year. Last year, we took all of the office supplies that used to be distributed through all the departments and just put them all into finance for the general office supplies. This year, we are taking all of the gas, water, and electric charges for all of our locations and everything and putting them together in finance rather than having them split out by all these different departments and things. The reason we're doing that is to make the paying of the bills so much more efficient. Rather than having a stack of bills like this high literally each month and having to go through a chart. It's like, oh, this one goes to parks and this one goes to public works. They're all going to go to one place, and it's just a lot more efficient in processing the payments of them. And if we need the detail of how much was electricity for this particular place in the park, we can pull up the bill and look at it. So we're not losing the data. We just don't have to deal with it every single month.
Can we go back one slide really quick, please?
Sure.
In regards to recreation fees on this one, does that account for the very good possibility that we are socially distancing for the entirety of 2022?
The recreation revenues were put in by our lovely Scott. And so he may be able to answer that more in his area.
But yeah, once we get there, that's good. I just want to.
Yeah, but I can't answer how he came up with those numbers, but we did utilize his numbers. Any other questions? Nope. All right. The next one has for the different departments, and it has the actual estimated and proposed. The general government, you'll notice, is jumping up quite a bit. That has to do with a lot of the utilities coming into the finance department. There's about 576,000 that's related to those utilities over the year. That goes in. Any questions on that one?
I mean, it is quite, in 2 budget cycles, we've increased our budget by about 2.5. Where in the grand scheme of things is that 2.5 coming from?
It's a very good question. Some of it during the pandemic, we utilized the fund balance because we knew revenues were down. But we cannot continue to use the fund balance. We've got to figure out what's going on.
Well, I guess, but our proposed budget from the 2020 actual to the 2022 proposed is quite a bit higher. I'm just wondering, is there something that we can tell the community that we are spending money on that increased the budget so I would say dramatically over the course of just 2 budget cycles?
So I think for that, if I'm following your question, so just taking general governments, because that increase alarms me as well. Marlene and I were talking about that quite a bit today. A lot of that increase that you see there is the shift of all utilities being placed into general government. So Marlene, feel free to correct me on any of the numbers. I think you said that one was around 600,000.
Yeah,
So
but
that's
that's
a
a
large-
shift. So that should be
Yes.
from the other departments into our department. That shouldn't be why the total is
The
going up.
total cost. So the total cost is a curious question. A lot of the contract prices are going up, our maintenance agreements, contracts, but are they going up 2 million? No. So a lot of this, unfortunately, I think goes back to the different step increases and how much that is. So Marlene's going to break those out and share some of those. So of that, Marlene, and again, if I say any numbers that are incorrect, please let me know. For instance, between police and fire salaries, and I don't know if this was with the 2% or if it's just simply the step and not the 2%, it totals about 300,000. So again, it's difficult talking about salaries because it makes it sound those services are needed, those people are needed, but there is a cost that, again, the long-term planning, how do we get there? But we aren't adding personnel. Councilwoman Arnold asked me great questions earlier this afternoon. She was comparing previous people number, and what'd you see? You saw like 156 and now there's 182. Previously, the part-time staff weren't included. So now what you see is part-time staff are included because they count and they count in terms of benefits and all those other things as well. So some of this may be how it's previously been looked at and reported and then compared to how we're doing it now. So I know that's not a real concise answer, but.
So if I understand correctly, from what we were talking about, the 2021 estimate at 18 million is about $1 million under what we would have budgeted. Was that what you said before?
Yes.
So we moved from 2020 to our budget in 21, we already moved up 2 million, right? We're moving up again. And I think that's what you're suggesting is that this isn't sustainable. I keep using that phrase, but
It's
we
not
don't know how to do it over time. It's just not gonna work.
No, it's just not sustainable. And the other thing is the $600,000 that's going into utilities now used to be in individual budgets. So rather than having each individual department figure out how to absorb that within their own budget, now it's been shifted off to finance. But yeah, we've added new people. We have that. I made a list of all the changes that I found in the budget that added up to that 2.2 million, and it isn't sustainable. We can't do this again next year. We can't do it.
And by putting the items all in general government, you can just see it easier.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it would just spread out over departments and didn't seem to be that large.
When we had that conversation as well, and we want it to be viewable. We want it to be transparent. We want these questions. We want to be able to dig into it. But it is unfortunate and it is labeled general government, but we have utilities as well, just like everybody else. And so it's a matter of how do they get paid? And, I agree in terms of positions. This is a hard time to add positions, but I would also go back to, in terms of government, it's incredibly lean. And so the positions that have been added, was it code enforcement or the building inspector, and asking for the permit tech. And then the only other position that's been added is the public affairs. So there's not a lot of positions that have been added. And
So would I be
there's two.
correct to say that cost has always been there? It was just never noticeable because it was spread out within the departments?
I think there's some of that. Costs are definitely going up, but I think a lot of that, and so perhaps as the department directors talk about that, and so public works, the projects are more expensive, materials and supplies are more expensive. So a lot of it is embedded in that as well. I'm sorry, Marlene.
Oh, you're fine.
So, but yes, I think the bottom line is costs have increased and it's not sustainable. That's absolutely true.
If you go to the next slide, this is just a visual of those numbers that were on the prior page, where you can see the various departments, how it's gone over the time frame.
Okay. That was the end of Marlene and I's, and then we can start the department presentations. And Madam Mayor, I would turn to you. I don't know if you want to take a small break now or.
What's your pleasure, guys? Need a small break?
I'm
So Sarah, not yet.
I would like
Oh.
one.
Okay.
I
So
went to do
for
one
the
before
public,
and I just.
let's
didn't
just
answer.
say, yes, we're going to take a 5-minute break, okay? And we'll be right back. Let's put our meeting back together again, and everybody's had a good break. And so we're now going to move on to the reports from the various departments. Yes? Yes. And the first one is from our police chief, Dale Curtis. And Dale, will you tell us about police?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Lamar, can you get the? Thank you. Yeah, obviously wanted to start with our general fund accounts. I'm not going to go over every line item, but I'll try and hit some of the primary ones, the larger items. And also I want to spend a little time on the personnel issues, because I think that is something that's important to understand how we staff and why we staff the way that we do. Sorry. As we already noted, personnel is the primary cost for us. It's human resource cost, and it's the biggest place for our outlays. Our contractual services, which are the vendors, where we have technical services, maintenance issues. Those are costs that are consistently rising and also consume a lot of our budget. A very small part of our budget is the actual materials and supplies that we use for operational success. And one of the things that we try and do, and I know all the department directors do this as well, is we try and make sure that we only budget for and use the items that are essential in providing the services and meet the expectations of the citizens. That's appropriate. That's appropriate. On the personnel services, we don't, sorry, that's my fault. In personnel services, we don't really have a lot of flexibility on what our costs are. It's based upon what our staffing level is. We do have little bit of control over the overtime. We budget for that. But as you can see, about 20 to 25,000 of the overtime costs are for special events, community days, in particular, the art fair, jazz festival, those kind of issues all require staffing, and that's where the bulk of our overtime costs are.
Yeah, can I ask a question about
Sure.
that? To your knowledge, do other communities ask for compensation for that kind of thing? I'm not suggesting necessarily that we should, I'm just curious.
I honestly don't know the definitive answer to that. I do know when I was at Clayton, they have the large art festival. They provide security without cost, but that's been some time ago, so I really don't know.
Thank you.
For our staffing, we're staffed with 48 sworn officers. As you can see here, here's our chart. Our professional standards unit is one lieutenant. He's in charge of managing our CLIA, all of our policies and procedures, our training, our public information officers, everything basically rolled into one. Field operations is the bulk of our operation. They cover the daily street. We have 5 different districts that we have to staff 24/7. So we require a minimum of 5 to 6 officers for each of those shifts. The investigation support, we have the criminal investigation unit. We have a supervisor with 6 detectives. They do the follow-up investigations. Those are necessary for any of the crimes that happen. The detectives are frequently outside of the city. We can't rely upon them always to be here. The community services unit, we have 5 officers. And that's a little bit deceiving. 2 of those officers are school resource officers who are at the school. The school reimburses us for 75% of their costs. So they really are not someone we can utilize except briefly in the summer when they're not on an extended vacation, but it's very limited time. The traffic unit, as I'm sure you probably are aware, one of our big concerns and big residential concerns is traffic issues, and they are assigned to the traffic division. Just as a comparison, I want to kind of show where we are in comparison to other cities in terms of the staffing. We are in the East Central Dispatch Consortium with 8 other cities. And as you can see there, we have the lowest ratio per capita of any of the cities in that consortium. Some of the larger cities, in comparison, again, we are at the bottom. I feel like we really are providing the biggest bang for the buck that we can in terms of our personnel and the people that we have here. They're our biggest asset, and they do a lot of hard work. Another thing to consider is that we do a lot of training. It comes close to the 2,080 hours a year. And that's equal to 1 officer being absent every day for training. So that's another thing that affects our staff. We have 29, on average of about 29 calls for service. It went down a little bit with COVID, but it's still been pretty much consistent for the last 5 years about that number. And materials and supplies, as I said, we really don't have, that's not really a large part of our budget. Of the 77,000+ in that budget, about 50,000 is for gasoline, it's for operation of the vehicles. We provide leather equipment and body armor for the officers. That's about another 9,000. So of that 77,000, about 60,000 is for gasoline and for soft body armor.
Can I ask,
Sure.
is vehicle upkeep in the capital budget, or is that what you have here as well?
It's in it's in the general fund, but it's in a different account.
Okay.
I'll be there to get that at Charlotte.
Okay.
Can't quite see here, but the 1,400 is for CLIA accreditation fees. We were in the forefront of the accreditation. It's something that's important to establishing good policies and procedures for the department, to give us the core to have a good culture and a good environment. And also, it's no longer an option. With Senate Bill 5, every police department by August, it has to be in or be accredited. So it's not, again, it's something that's important to the operation. Jail services, I'm sorry, I can't. Our $9,000, that's gone down considerably over the past 2 or 3 years. A large part of that's due to COVID, and another part of it's due to SB 5. We're making fewer arrests and also some of our policies and procedures. So That's a significant part of the professional services, but it's still a lot lower than what it used to be. On our meetings and conferences, these are something that are optional. It's not something that, you know, we have to do, but it's something that's, I really feel is important for staff and for our employees. It gets us to ongoing training, information exchange, and it maintains job proficiency. Also, the post credits that you get attending these conferences are needed for certification. We can get them in other ways, but this is really one of the best ways to obtain those. And our maintenance contracts, the body camera and maintenance storage fees are our largest expense, $29,000. Again, that's a pretty expensive item, but I think it's paid dividends in terms of our use of it and our ability to review officer performance and behaviors. I also think it's something that the community expects now. I think it's really important for us to maintain that, even though, again, it's a cost that probably is going to increase incrementally in the future. And if you have any questions about any of the items, feel free to stop me. Security camera maintenance, it's another item that's fairly high ticket for maintenance. It's gone up quite a bit over the last 5 years, mainly because the system's about 12 years old. We've upgraded it several times, and it's one of the things that we have in a future CIP budget proposal to try and replace, because it is becoming costly to maintain. The in-car video, software maintenance, and hardware maintenance fees are about $8,000. Again, I think that's something that's important for us to have. It provides an extra perspective for the officers on the street, monitoring behaviors. We have complaints or concerns. We can always go, just like with the body cameras, we can go to the video, and it helps us there. Supervisors typically review the body cameras and the vehicle cameras for performance. It's do random audits of them. So again, we can see how the officers are performing on the street and make sure that things are going the way that we expect them to go. RSEG is a regional computer crime education enforcement group. We belong to that. It's a kind of a consortium of all the departments in St. Louis County. It's an area where we can go if we have a cell phone or a computer that we need to investigate as a result of a crime. We can take it there for that fee. It's at no cost. It operates on a grant from the state, basically. Just so for instance, one phone, an investigation on one phone, and if you don't have a contract with them, it will charge you $150 an hour. Can run anywhere from 20 to 40 hours just to try and break open the phone and investigate it. So it's money that's well spent. On our AVLs, the automatic vehicle locators for the fleet, I think it's important instrument for us to have. The dispatchers are able to see where the cars are on the street at all times. It's a safety issue. Also, we have a question of where an officer might be, or question again of performance issues. We can use that as a tool to determine, where a car was, where it's at. So again, I think it's something it's important for us to have. It's a bit of technology that really most departments have and should have. The Global inReach is a software program that's associated with our CAD system in the dispatch center. The officers are able to access the CAD from the Global inReach. They're able to see where other officers are on calls. The supervisor can monitor to see where officers are on calls. They enter information into the desk book that's on CAD, so that if they're going to a call, for instance, wherever it might be, say that they're going to a domestic dispute, they can go on to the inReach and see there'll be notes on there or alerts. Have we gone there before? Who's there? What was the circumstances? It helps them in performance issues. And then finally, again, it helps the supervisors in terms of being able to keep track of where the officers are and what they're doing. Regis Commission is obviously a very expensive part of the maintenance package, but it's a vendor that's essential. It allows us access to the state criminal justice system and NCIC, the National Criminal Information Center. Officers, we have to use that for all of our entries for arrest, for histories. Anytime an officer wants to make an inquiry, it has to go through Regis. So it's a fee really it's indispensable, something that we need to operate. Mobile data fees in the cars for the laptops, $7,600. Again, another fairly large expense, but it's something that's important. The officers kind of need that. They're able to run inquiries to their mobile data. They're able to do their reports on there. They're able to access inReach through the CAD system, again, off of the mobile data terminal. So again, it's really an important tool of law enforcement now. To have a modern, technologically enhanced department, you really need to have an MDT. And so here's the vehicle maintenance. We estimate about 13,000 a year. And that's all we can really do. We've been able to maintain a fairly new fleet in comparison to where we were 15 years ago. So that really helps a lot on the maintenance fees. The auto accident repair fee, that looks a little, you might think that's a little high, and it is again, looks like a huge expense, but the problem we have there, the issue is, until about 2 years ago, Marlene can support me on this, we were able to, if there was an accident and someone else was at fault, say we had a $10,000 repair that they would pay to the police department for the accident. We used to be able to put that back into the maintenance budget. Because of auditing practices, we can no longer do that. So 2 accidents and that $15,000 is basically gone, because even though we get the money back, it's coming out of our budget and we don't see it again. It goes back into general revenue. So I thank the auditors for that. The vehicle equipment transfers, whenever we buy new vehicles, we have to take the equipment, the expensive equipment out of the older cars, transfer them over to the new vehicles. And that's basically the fee. It's not, again, the vendors that do that are not cheap, because, which is reasonable, because it's a lot of expensive equipment that needs to be installed correctly. So it's again, a pretty essential requirement. We have what appears to be a fairly substantial training budget, and it is, and I appreciate it, and the officers appreciate it. I think training, especially in today's environment, is a very important tool. Again, to meet expectations of the community, to get post-certified, to get develop officers and the supervisors and commanders. It's important for us to be able to send them to classes and get the training that's necessary to keep them contemporary practices and procedures and what's expected. The capital outlay in the general fund budget is fairly low. These are items that will last more than 5 years, but they are in this budget because of the cost is lower. We're asking for 3 mobile radar units. We need to incrementally replace the radar units. They're anywhere between 8 to 12 years old, so we'd like to try and incrementally replace those over the next few years. Department pistols. The only reason, I shouldn't say the main reason, primary reason we need to do the pistols is whenever we have a retirement, one of the things we do is we give if the officer has been here 20 years or more and retires, we give them their service revolver or pistol. So we've had 2 officers retire last year. We need to replace 2 pistols. And that's all in the general fund. Does anybody have any questions about any of those or any items that I didn't cover?
I have a question.
Sure.
I went back to your salary issues, and it looks as though your proposed budget for personal services, which is on page 150 in our book, you're proposing $4.7 million for personal services, which is even less than the 2021 budget and a little bit more than this year. How is that possible? Is it because we have so many, how many openings do we have now?
Right now we have 4 openings, but we're preparing to make a couple of hires, so we'll reduce that significantly. But what you're asking the question, and Dr. Peoples could maybe help you with this, but in preparing the budget, one of the considerations was that we were hardly ever fully staffed. And right now we do have some openings. So we probably won't be filling all those positions. It'll be incrementally over the budget year. So we should have some savings there. I'm not exactly sure how that was calculated, but that's a big part of that.
So from my perspective, when we keep talking about, all this additional money for salaries, it doesn't show up to be in your department.
I don't think it's reflected in it totally, no. But
Yeah, it's
again,
not here.
because of the
So
staff.
it's not the police that are part of that 1.2 million.
Well, I don't want to say that, Mayor, because to
It
answer,
doesn't show here.
to answer Laura's question, it's a 9-year step plan that we ran,
9
and
years, okay.
that's something that we didn't have before last year.
Yeah.
So that will, I mean, hopefully we will get close to being fully staffed. So it will affect the budget at some point, but for this year, it doesn't, like you said, it
So
doesn't
it'll be
affect,
next year's issue.
again, depending upon our staffing, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to.
So just so I'm clear on this, the budget numbers that we have, so the 4.7 is with leaving 2 positions open for the full fiscal year?
Yes.
Again, I'm not quite sure how they
That,
Yes.
formulated that.
Okay.
It was 2 fully burdened positions, so all the ERE stuff that goes along with them. Because they're rolling vacancies will pretty much account for 2 full-time, because you had 6 open, just made 2 hires.
Yes.
so essentially then the 2022 proposed really underestimates the cost of a fully staffed police department.
Absolutely.
I guess my other question then, and there's no editorial in this question, I'm just curious, if we can sustain rolling vacancies for a full year. And I saw the number on there, and clearly we have fewer police officers per capita than other departments, but if we can sustain it through the whole year, are those positions entirely necessary, I guess is the question.
My best answer to that is they are, and it's for the reason you just suggested. There's a couple things. One is it's always been difficult to recruit quality people. It has become very difficult to recruit quality applicants. If we reduce our authorized strength, say by those 2 numbers down to 46, then we'll be down to 44 looking to hire 2 people.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have one other staffing question that I don't know that's in here. We approved somebody being tasked to a task force
Yes.
that in the spring
Yes.
with the expectation that it would essentially pay for itself. Has
Yes.
that turned out to be true?
Hopefully I communicated that correctly last spring. I said it would take us a year to find out. So he's been in there not quite a year.
Okay.
Because what happens is the forfeiture funds we don't get credit for them until he's been in the unit, and it takes a little while for those to funnel through. So it's going to take a little bit more than a year for us to find out exactly how much is coming from that. And again, as I promised you, if it's not at least paying for itself, and I expect it to do better than that, then that's a place that we would look to bring him back.
Thanks for that. I forgot the second part of that, so I appreciate you reinforcing that.
Are there other questions for Dale? Good.
Okay, if not, I'll move the capital improvements. I'm sorry, the general to the shared services, which is also in the general fund account. Primarily the cost of the shared services is for the East Central Dispatch Center. The office supplies portion of this, excuse me, is for the prisoner transport unit. We have a shared prisoner transport unit with 4 other cities. And so we share in the cost of prisoner processing supplies, which would be office supplies. It's a small amount, it's about $5,000 each year. The overwhelming bulk of on this account is from the East Central Dispatch Center. So communications for both police and fire, it's not just the police department. They have an executive director, the deputy director, 4 supervisors, and 18 communications officers. Our share of the cost is 21%. I did try and do, it's not, I can't promise you it's a on the dime accurate account, but I did try to take a look at what it would cost us to have our own dispatching service. And it still saves us well over $100,000 a year. And that doesn't account for the fact that you have to, you can no longer stay stagnant with the equipment. It requires a lot of new equipment. We're looking at next gen 911, a new CAT system, which you're talking $250,000, which again, we would share the cost. So this is still, even though I think our costs are a little higher than what they should be in the sharing formula, it still saves us a substantial amount of money. And also it's a much more professional operation than we could have by hiring our own dispatchers here.
How's the sharing formula determined?
Dr. Peoples.
It's an excellent question, Mayor. So the Board of Directors for ECDC are made up of each city manager of the cities that are involved in ECDC. And that has been a mystery this year in terms of how the sharing formula is. It's based on calls of service and how those calls are counted and how each jurisdiction reports those calls.
Okay.
People may not always report same. So it varies. There's quite a bit of discussion about how we can get more consistency to how the calls are reported.
Is there an executive director hired at your guys'
Yes.
discretion?
Yes, and Chief could give more background on that, but I understand there's been quite a few directors in the last 3 or 4 years.
There's been considerable turnover. It's a difficult environment.
Those city managers are really hard
For a
to get
number of
along
reasons.
with.
Well, not the least of which is it's difficult to work for 8 different bosses, and that's one of the problems. If they're all like Dr. Peoples, then it wouldn't be a problem.
I'm so glad you cleaned that up.
All right, moving on. Capital improvements, we have about 275,000 in requests for this year. First item is an accident reconstruction system. I don't know if you recall from last year, we had asked for one with all the bells and whistles, which was considerably more, but we've pared it down to the very basic system. It's important to have one. Right now, we're operating with a system we borrowed, I shouldn't say borrowed, was donated to us from another department that's about 12 years old. So we'd like to be able to purchase something that's more reliable, not necessarily state of the art, but it's something that has good technology, will be able to allow us to reconstruct serious accident scenes and give us reliable data and analysis of what exactly happened.
Chief, I always wondered why law enforcement ever thought it was their prerogative to do this. Like, why not leave it up to the individual drivers and the insurance companies?
I would not disagree with you on that. There has been a lot of background work done on having a private entity handle normal accidents. On the more serious accidents, though, where there's serious injuries or fatalities, I think that's an area where we should still be involved, and that really is what this is for. On the minor accidents, we really wouldn't use the accident reconstruction system. When we probably only have a half dozen serious incidents a year, and fortunately rarely, but we do have them fatalities. That's where you would need this.
Is this item in the CIP program now?
Yes, it's in the current, it's requested of the CIP. You may not see it, it's, excuse me, it's not accompanied by a photograph because it's not at the amount, it's not over something that's going to be in it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the CIP details, but I don't see an item for 9,000.
It should be in there, I believe.
Unless I'm missing something.
It's part of 901, accident reconstruction system.
What page do you want, Chief?
I'm sorry, I don't have the pages, the same pages that you do, but it's just in my adjusted worksheet. I've got it in 901 with the car video system and the men's locker.
Is that what that is, the in-car video system?
No, it's the accident reconstruction system.
I don't see it in the CIP.
I don't see it in the CIP yet.
I've got it in my adjusted printout.
And that's okay. I mean, it is supposed to be there.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll fix it.
Well, if it's not there, it's my error, but I had it in my adjusted.
If you look on page 158 in your budget book, under capital improvement, public safety, under 901 operational equipment, it has the 119,000 for 2022, and that's made up of the 3 items, which includes the accident reconstruction system.
And what are the other two with that?
The other 2 is the in-car video system for 60,000 and a men's locker room remodel for 50,000.
Which is where he was going with the next
Yeah,
stop.
that's where he was headed.
He was headed.
But I think you still need to add it to
Those
the
together.
total CIP. In the back, in the details.
All right, I'm sorry about that.
That's all right, that's fine.
Where's my-
The next item was the men's locker room, the shower bath renovation. The men's locker room is not, the bathroom in the men's locker room is the original in the building. It hasn't been touched in 50+ years.
And that picture is not doing it justice. I've been down there to see, it. It's just downright nasty.
So we would like for it to look more like these bottom pictures. That's kind of what we envision. We did get some rough estimates, so it's more of a plug number, but we're certain we can get it done for under 50,000. So
But you actually pushed this up in the budget, correct?
yes, we did. We pushed it up for this year.
Yeah.
I believe, Emerson, you were on a crusade about.
Yeah.
I was. When I looked at the book for the first time, I said, good Lord. And I just thought maybe the picture was bad. I went down and looked at myself and it looks worse than it is.
All right. And the in-car video system is the next item. The current system is about 7 or 8 years old. It's outliving its usefulness technology-wise. The pixels, the data stream, the hardware maintenance are all becoming issues. So again, we feel like the in-car videos is an important part of our operations now, and I think it's something that the public expects us to have. We may be able, what we'd like to do is to integrate it with our body cameras, but that's one of the things that we'll have to take a look at. If it's cost prohibitive, well, we won't do that, but something that we think we can bring in for under this amount. But that's another goal that we would like to accomplish with replacing the current system.
Does that include storage or that's just for the capturing of video?
This is just for the capturing of video. The in-car video has a separate actually in-house server. So we don't have the same kind of storage fees. It's only the maintenance fee, the contract maintenance fee that I showed you earlier. So there isn't the attendant storage fees that you get with the body cam.
Okay.
We have a routine plan that we've utilized really over the past 15 years. We try and replace 3 to 4 police vehicles a year. This year we're on a 3-year schedule. What that does is it allows us not to have cars that have more than 100,000 miles in general. And again, like I said, it keeps them fairly well maintained, reduces our maintenance costs, and it's also where the officers live, 12 hours out of the day. The trade-ins that we're trading in this year is a 2012 Chevrolet Impala. Although it only has 60,000 miles, it was the car that was used for parking enforcement. It probably has at least 100,000 hours, on the engine. So it's also pretty nasty on the inside. So we're looking to replace that one. The other 2 cars are 217s. They'll be 5 years old when we replace those. Both of those have almost 100,000 miles on them now. They'll have well over 100,000 when we get them replaced.
Are you concerned at all about the supply issues currently in car markets?
We were unable to get the Ford Explorers last year, which is why we have the Tahoes. I'm not, to be honest with you, hopefully Chevy won't litigate me, but we're not wild about the Tahoes. And that's why we got it, but we got them last year because of the supplies and things. We've been assured by Ford, and I hope it's accurate, that they will be able to deliver this year. And I know that the chips and things are causing a big problem, but if it is, it'll probably be the same thing with the Chevy. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to get them delivered. Normally what happens is we'll order them sometime in August, and we look, maybe if we're lucky, we'll get them sometime in February or March.
Really?
Yes.
All the bid with the equipment and everything installed at that point.
Another big ticket item is the portable radios. The current radios we have were purchased in 2014 with funds from the St. Louis County bond issue. It's for the ECC. It's a bond issue that doesn't, it's a tax that doesn't sunset. However, St. Louis County, the ECC has indicated many times now that replacement was not in the original plan. So if it's a sole source item, it has to be compatible with the countywide ECC radio system. And we think we can do it incrementally over the next 5 or 6 years, replace all of the radios. we really don't have an option other than to stay with the older radios, which would have maintenance problems and maintenance issues. These are already, this is the last year that any of them are under warranty, but we believe that with rotating them, they're still in pretty good shape. We'll have extras when we rotate. The ones that we take out of service will still probably be pretty good radios. So if we do have an issue with one of them that are in service, we'll swap those out. So we think with this plan, we can do this in, maybe 6 or 7 years to replace them all, and we shouldn't have a problem with it. Go to the next generation of radio.
This frosts me. I mean, this is the thing that makes me really frosts me. From someone who worked so hard on that ECC campaign, they have money. They have plenty of money. This is something that the municipalities need to get together and do something about, because this is crazy. They have enough money to replace those radios. We need to find people who are on that board and get to them.
Who's the they in this?
See, the Emergency Communications Center board that,
Okay.
excuse me, that makes a determination on how the money's spent. St. Louis Area Police Chiefs Association has approached them several times on this issue, and they're pretty much of a hard line. They said that it was not an original plan to replace them, and they don't intend to replace them.
What do they use the money on then?
For the giant communication center and salaries, I really don't know. That's a mystery to me. I don't have an answer for that.
It's a mystery, Laura.
Well,
All right. We're going to get the mayors involved in this one.
And we have the mobile data terminals. Again, we have kind of a rotation plan for those. We have 15 MDTs. We try and replace 3 every year, which means that the oldest ones will be over 6 years old when they're swapped out. That's about the life of the technology for any piece of computer equipment now. Some of our future proposals is the new lock system for City Hall. The current system is old technology. It's needing quite a bit of repair, some costly repairs. We feel that we'd like to be able to provide security for the police department and the fire department here at City Hall, and have a more technologically advanced, easier system that we can manage and it's not breaking down constantly. Also, next year, one of the things that we're looking at, as I did mention before, is a new security system for City Hall building, placing the fire department here. The system we currently have really doesn't cover all the entrances. The technology is getting old. It's been upgraded several times already. The system that we're looking at, and we have got a proposal on, would cover all these entrances and exits to City Hall, also the waterfront and the front. And also, I don't know if we can have arrangements for Masonic Lodge that use that as the point for the lot, but we may use a pole there if we can get some energy. But regardless, it shouldn't increase the cost too much. But the system we want would cover the whole building and all of the parking lots, as opposed to the system we have now. It has limited ability.
Chief, what about the internal portions of the building?
This would cover that as well. This, I don't have a picture of that. We have internal cameras in the police department. We want to also upgrade what we have here in the City Hall side. I think it's important for, especially in the front, to have some security cameras.
Well, I agree with you, but when's the last time the system has really been updated?
Probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Maybe longer than that.
And we're pushing this off to 23.
Yeah, this will be next budget year.
I'm very keen on employee safety and the security of the people inside this building. I just can't see why we would push that off to next year. If these these door locks, if they're going bad, they're just, we have to replace a core and replace it. It's just as expensive to get a new one. I just don't see why we would push that off to next year. That's almost like buying paper clips to do the work. It just, the security of the staff in this building is important. And from what
so maybe I don't quite understand. Is it failing right now?
I wouldn't say that it's failing. As a for instance, the lock on the main entry to the police department We've tried to get repaired several times. It's cost us in excess of $1,000, which you can almost buy a new lock for. We've had to replace the lock here in City Hall a year and a half or 2 years ago. Maybe Marlene remembers because I don't come in there too often. But they're just starting to be not as reliable.
Okay.
I mean, whenever they go, we generally are able to, we have them repaired. We are having an issue with the one, like I said, in the police department where it's,
This is part of the infrastructure of City Hall. It's something that's just needed. I don't know, we have panic buttons for staff. Those ladies down in the front desk or ladies upstairs, they need some let you know that something's going on.
we do have panic buttons for customer service, and we did upgrade and put in some buttons upstairs for staff upstairs as well.
And can you tell who's pushing that button?
We are trying, I guess the definitive answer is that I can't tell you for sure. I don't think so. But we're trying to fix that. We're working with Tech Electronics so that the dispatch center will be able to tell where it's coming from. But right now, the answer would be no.
So you just get an indication that something's going on, but you don't know where in the building it is?
Yes.
I repeat, the security of our staff is important. This is something, it shouldn't be a push-off budget. It needs to be done.
And just so you're aware, these are very expensive items.
Oh, I know. I've done security systems all over the country. And there was just no question that when it came to the security of our staff and of our buildings, and the people we serve, it was a no-brainer. We did it. And I think that's how we should think of this here at City Hall.
So Mayor and Council, what I will do as these discussions are progressing so I've made note of Councilman Smith's suggestion. So what we'll do is we'll send out at the end of, well, probably not the end of the night, it's gonna be a late night. Hopefully sometime tomorrow, send out a list of the suggested changes and get either a consensus, and if there's time, if it's council's pleasure, we can go through that list this evening as I take notes and we can see if there's consensus. But that will allow Marlene and I time to work in the budget and to make these shifts and changes. So if that plan is acceptable, that's how we'll plan on moving forward. And
Oh,
I've
that's
got yours duly noted at the top of the list.
Chief, in your expert opinion, do we need to go forward in 2022, or can these safety enhancements wait till 23?
Well, I mean, I have to be honest, if I thought it was a critical need, I would ask for them in this year's budget. I think we could stretch it out for another year, but again, there are some issues with it.
I've been keeping a list of possibilities for that $4.2 million. And there are things like this that if we keep that as a separate fund, which was the recommendation of the municipal league, is that you don't take that 4.2 and put it in with anything else, but you keep it as a separate accounting fund. There are things like this that we could put in there, your budget software, the security lighting, things that keep coming up that might be an appropriate place to spend some of that money. And I think that might help with this.
Sure. And, I think that's a great idea, Mayor. It's just that when staff is leaving at night, they need something to let a panic button to let them know that something's going on. My church has that.
All right, then the last item, I have that a few years out, is the flooring in the main police headquarters. At the time we're looking at replacement, it will be about 25 years old. The flooring is becoming very worn and cracked. I think a 25-year lifespan is inadequate to expect from this type of product, and it's all tile. So again, it's something that we'd like to see about 3 or 4 years out. One of the things that I will mention, I didn't put anything in the future CIP planning, but it's something we will think about, and I certainly will make Dr. Peoples be aware of is replacements of the body camera. We have vendors are constantly changing their mechanisms for deliveries and your options. It used to be you could buy things, buy the product, and then use it for 5 or 6 years with maintenance contracts. Most of the vendors are now tying it to you can buy the product, but it's on basically what seems like a lease. You have 4 or 5 years. Even though we can get out of it, it's something that I said, it's important for us to have. Whenever the current Axon body camera contract is over, it's a possibility we may have a capital improvements item there as well. Or it may be that we can just renew the year to year with them, which would be a much more cost effective thing to do. But I'm just not sure where that's headed. So I just want to make you aware of that.
Thank you.
I have a question related to that. Would you, the integrations between the vehicle cameras and the body cameras, would that not be smart to do that now or soon when you look at buying the new body cameras?
That's our plan. So that's our goal, is to do that. But for instance, when we looked at the body cameras, a couple of different vendors, one of them, the price was outrageously expensive, and they're talking the difference between $120,000 and $75,000. So if the cost to integrate with Axon is cost prohibitive, I'm not sure that the benefit we would get out of it is worth that cost, but it's something we'll evaluate. It's our goal, and I think we can do it, but.
And do those companies come automatically? I mean, are some more prone to have the integrations built in, or is it always a third sort of party?
No surprise, they're all trying to make it so that you can only integrate with their product and also make their product the one that's the most cost effective to get the most money out of. So it's tough trying to separate the two. But again, when we look at the cost factor, it's something we have to evaluate.
Anything else? Can we go on to fire and then we'll take a break after fire?
Absolutely.
Fire next. Thank you, Dale.
Okay, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, we're going to hear from Chief Yowie.
Excuse me, Marie asked me how long it was going to take. I told her approximately 10 minutes, so I expect you all to help me out with that.
Fat chance.
Yeah, right. So I am not going to bombard you with slides, and I picked the things that are unique to the fire department to present on, and we can discuss the others as you would like. But the first part is our personnel budget. Our personnel budget is 95.5% of our total budget. Some of the things that are unique to that is if you look at our overtime budget, it's fairly high. We have a minimum staffing requirement of 4 person on each apparatus. We also have 12 person assigned to each shift with a minimum staffing of 11. So 80% of the time we have somebody on vacation. That takes us down to minimum staffing. If somebody calls in sick, that generates overtime. 60% of the time, around 60% of the time, we have at least 1 person on overtime throughout the calendar year.
Why? I mean, I understand the mechanics, but we're in a position that happens regularly. So what are the options to make it not happen regularly? I guess is the question.
I had put in a request for 3 additional personnel, 1 on each shift. That would do 2 things for us. It would allow 2 people to be on vacation during prime months, because right now we have people forced to take vacation in January, December, and not the Christmas holidays, because they have to use it. They don't get to use it when they want to use it. The second half of the year, not in the prime vacation time, we would use them to cover extended sick leave absences. Right now, I have 1 firefighter out that had neck surgery. He's going to be out 16 weeks. That's going to generate overtime that entire time. I have a couple other firefighters that are going through long-term health issues, and they all generate overtime. And we are required by consensus standard and by contract to have 4 personnel on each apparatus, as we should for firefighter safety reasons. But we generate a lot of overtime.
Why not work out an agreement with, I don't know, Rock Hill? And we can share employees.
Rock Hill runs 3, sometimes 2 on their fire apparatus.
Who nearby,
So they
right?
don't
Who
have a-
nearby has 4?
Do what?
Has enough.
Yeah, who nearby has 4, right? If Rock Hill doesn't work, is there somebody else nearby we can explore that with?
We are currently We are the only one that have 4 personnel on each truck. And we started that in year 2000.
You mean in central dispatch or in broader?
No, just
Geography.
within the general location,
Okay.
within the East Central group. So we do generate a lot of overtime. And
Do the other municipalities that surround us or any municipality in St. Louis County have as much overtime as what we do or on a per rata share?
I don't know that. I know Clayton they are currently budgeting, I believe, to put 4 personnel on their apparatus. They just reached out to me the other day, but I think that's their plan, is to budget for that.
So we were ahead of the curve here for
We
2 decades.
We were way ahead of the curve. Prior to the way we currently run, we ran 2 pumpers with 3 personnel on them, and then we had a 100-foot ladder truck. And depending on who was in quarters with the time of the alarm, you may jump on the ladder truck, or we kept moving people around. And that was very dangerous because most of the time we ran a ladder truck with 2 people.
So as a result of us being above the curve, we've been hiring more firefighters than other municipalities around us. Is that accurate?
Our staffing has not changed.
Staffing has stayed the same over the past 2 decades?
Yes. Yes, we actually got rid of one piece of apparatus. We got rid of one of the pumpers. We bought a different type of ladder truck that we could run on EMS calls and such. So now we have a ladder truck at Engine House 1. We have a pumper at Engine House 2 in the ambulance.
So have you figured out what it would cost if we hired additional firefighters? Would it get rid of some of this? And is it to our benefit or to not?
So Chief Yohe did figure out that cost, and if you have it handy, you're welcome to share it. I could not see in the budget climate that we're in bringing forth a proposal to add 3 additional staff. And yes, it would help some of the cost of overtime, but it wouldn't guarantee that there's not overtime for other situations, and it would not completely get rid of the overtime. There's also some other factors. There's also other solutions. None of them are great solutions. One of the things I chatted with Chief Yohe about, and there's a cost, and Marlene worked out the cost of that as well. Part of the issue is some of Councilman Franklin's earlier questions in terms of what are our policies on accrual. We have very generous accruals, and the fire service has terrific staff with long-term service. You have a lot of people who've been here a lot of years. Some of them have as many as 3, 4, I see 500 hours on the books.
I don't know if it's that high, but they've got significant, a lot of them are maxed out on vacation. And some of that's attributed to the work schedule. They don't have to use a lot of vacation. They carry that maximum over and vacation or sick leave as well.
So a solution that I've seen do other places, again, it's imperfect, is that you do a one-time vacation buyout. You can have it at 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So you can allow people to do that. There is a cost to that, but it knocks down the vacation hours. And so some of the overtime does not accrue as fast. There's also, you could hire 1 staff and have a floater position. That also is imperfect. So there are many solutions that require just thinking through, but they all come at a cost. And certainly if you remember what the 3, and I probably have it in here, what the 3 staff would cost. But again, due to the budget climate and where we're at and trying to forecast where we go from 3 to 5 years, I could not see adding that many staff right now.
So I guess I'm gonna go back to my original question, Chief, and ask and I understand that Rock Hill and the other surrounding municipalities only have 3 per apparatus, but what's the harm in reaching out to those municipalities to determine if there is an employee there that would be able to assist in preventing us from having as much overtime?
We have a problem with that. There's a workers' comp or coverage. We have insurance questions, and there's a collective bargaining agreement that probably so lending an employee like that, it would be problematic. You have mutual aid, but you're not supposed to use mutual aid to fill in our gaps necessary. But to lend an employee would really be an issue. There's seniority problems. There's all kinds of things that play, even if you're trying to call it a float. But the biggest issue is going to be insurance.
But I mean, that can be fixed contractually, right?
There would be pay issues as well as like ours, pay scale compared to Rock Hills and bringing that man over to work in our department along with the contract.
And I appreciate that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is here we have a union right now that is advocating for a consolidation of multiple fire districts and fire municipalities. Yet we somehow, for some reason, keep finding excuses why we can't work with each other. Just the next municipality over. So it seems to me that there's a disconnect there.
I
And that-
agree, because there are certain departments that have contracts and there are certain departments locally that do not have contracts with the union. We're one that does. So we run into problems that way. If we need mutual aid, we can borrow them.
Absolutely, but that's not our problem, is it mutual aid? It just seems to me that, you know, we can find solutions for the things that we want, but we're refusing to find solutions for the things that, I don't know, would be actually benefit the community or the St. Louis County at large. And that to me, and I'm not putting this blame on you, Chief, or Webster Groves, but that to me seems to be the underlying problem so often. And I think that this is a perfect example. It's like, certainly we can get around contractually figuring out how to ensure that if there's extra employees from other municipalities, how they can come over and assist Webster Groves and vice versa. Yet there doesn't seem to necessarily be a desire or a willingness to want to even broach that subject, other than to say, hey, let's combine 14 municipalities or 14 fire districts wholesale and give up our firehouses, our apparatuses and everything like that. Certainly there's a middle ground somewhere in between those two.
But if you remember in that presentation on the consolidation, there were also, a 27% increase in employees.
Yes, there
And
was.
that's to make up for the
Yeah.
shortfalls of our neighboring departments.
That's to get to the 4 per apparatus.
Correct.
And that's like a union desire, but I mean, Rock Hill probably would say, hey, we're operating okay, right? I'm not asking you to.
Yeah, I am not gonna, but I am going to say that I do advocate for the 4 personnel.
Absolutely.
And that is a nationally recognized consensus standard as best practice.
Absolutely, and I think that we should continue that, but as a result of us wanting to continue that, we have to find other solutions in order to meet our staffing needs, it seems to me.
So,
I understand what you're saying. I'm just not sure how we can borrow people from lesser staffed departments.
and I guess Marie mentioned there's some other alternatives, so I think we need those alternatives to be presented to us as well, whether it's right now for this budget, maybe it's just during this next year. Because there's got to be there's got, whether it's municipal cooperation or whether it's one of the other answers, there's got to be something.
There are, as I said, none of them are pretty. There is a
Yeah.
cost to the overtime, vacation buyout, whatever we want to look at. There's also policy changes that need to be put in place, as I've already shared with the accruals, and not to take things away from current employees, but to change future practices. So it's not a continued problem. And the floater option, a lot of areas do it. It's not always the most favored, but it is an option. And that would also include having 1 additional staff. So we can certainly bring some of those options forth. And certainly Chief Yoa's option, which should not be overlooked just because I didn't include it, but adding the 3 fire personnel, that is an option as well.
Would you be matching the cost over time to what we're trying to get rid of now? Find out there's overtime, it's something that's going to probably spread over the next 3 budget cycles, what it's going to cost. Eventually you'll see it go away, but now you're going to see that increased cost over the next 3-4 years.
Well, I'm reluctant to call it a problem because again, we have staff who've been here many years, but Chief Yoa, of your staff, what do you have, 39?
We have 36 line firefighters.
Of your staff, what percentage, this may be a fair question, would you say have been here 15 plus years?
That would be a low percentage.
Okay.
Because we did have significant turnover up until the recent years.
Okay.
We've worked very hard to curb the turnover. I would say 15%, doing rough numbers. We're not very heavy on seniority,
Mhm.
but we're heavy on vacation and
Sure.
carryovers.
So when I hear you say 15%, I still think that's a lot. That is saying something for a department. And where I was going with that is that then you also have individuals with higher salaries. And so we're top heavy. Not necessarily in positions or number of staffing, but as individuals retire out and we're hiring in newer staff, new to fire service, salaries are going to be lower, overtime costs would then be lower. So we've got a lot of compounding factors is what I'm trying to share.
And I think we'll just say, see what you can do to help us so we can move on, because we have many more other departments tonight.
Hey, I told you guys I'd be done.
Yeah, we blew up your time.
Yeah, right. No, it's important that we talk about this. Some other things unique to our personnel cost is the personnel allowance, which we used to call the uniform allowance. It's paid out twice a year to the line staff, and that's for them to buy dress uniforms, station wear, boots, not fire boots, but, you know, station wear boots, equipment, personal ancillary equipment that they would buy. We have holiday pay, where all the firefighters get paid the half a day for all the holidays. So whether you're working the holiday or not, you get paid. Personnel on duty get paid time and a half. All the other firefighters get paid for a half a day at straight pay.
I don't understand.
That's, I mean,
Is
so
that
getting
pretty
paid for
standard?
holiday, right? I mean, it's like getting paid for Memorial Day or something like that. Like,
Correct.
even if you're not working, that's normal, right?
Marlene, you're looking at me like
I was,
this.
I was trying to think of,
Their
you said
salary,
if they're scheduled to work that day, they don't get time and a half, they get regular time.
but then they get holiday pay.
But they get everybody gets the holiday pay.
Correct.
Because you don't know who's scheduled when on holidays or not holidays. Where the rest of us get a day off for a holiday, they do not have any days off in
So
their
it
schedule.
compensates for the
they're-
rotating nature
Right.
who's
Yeah.
on. Okay.
So everybody,
And it's
it
not-
gets compensated
understand.
across the board.
Yeah, and they're not getting paid extra for the person who works that day. It's just that
Okay,
they don't have a holiday day off.
thank you. That helps.
I'm not sure I'm there. So if I'm working on, I think I heard someone say Memorial Day. If I'm working on Memorial Day, I get straight pay. Plus
Yes.
I get half a day of holiday pay.
Everybody gets half the
Everybody
day
gets
for
And so if
holiday
I'm
pay.
not working on Memorial Day, I still get,
Right. If you're at home
Yeah.
enjoying a hot dog, you still get the half day.
Correct.
But that's your normal day off. That's not an extra holiday that you get off. Got it.
Right, because we're there 365,
Right.
24/7.
We get it.
And that's not uncommon. My daughter works at a hospital in North Carolina, and they do the exact same thing. Everybody gets holiday pay. And lastly, on this list, we have the Fair Labor Standards Act. So in the Fair Labor Standards Act, it is, they have determined that a firefighter's work week is 52 hours. Anything over that is paid in overtime. So we work a 56-hour week average for our firefighters. So they get that FSLA pay is their built-in overtime, if you will, for their work schedule.
So that's not included in the overtime.
That is not included in the overtime. Our operational budget, I just picked out a few to put in here, and this is what I call Band-Aids, boots, and brains. We spend $30,000 a year on EMS supplies. That's medications, bandages, oxygen, anything EMS related. We spend about $30,000 a year on that. Personnel equipment, that is fire gear, boots, helmets, those kind of things, $15,000 on that. And in training, we budget $12,000, which has been the standard. This year, I think we estimated it at $8,500 because we tried to partner for training as much as we can. Then lately, we've been saving quite a bit because we've been partnering for live fire training. We brokered a deal with Eureka to use their live training facility, and it saves us a significant amount of money. So in the calendar year 2020, just to kind of offset this a little bit, our ambulance billing generated almost $445,000.
Chief, I remember when I first got on council, there was like we were redoing how we were gonna get the billing for the ambulance, like in order to hopefully increase our payout or increase the amount
Our
collected.
revenues,
Yeah, has
So-
that proven fruitful?
we have not changed that. The council decided that they did not want to make any changes at that time.
Okay,
Right, we had looked at doing a more consolidated billing.
yeah.
At that time, the council decided they did not want to make any changes.
Would you still recommend that now?
I would, it seems there are more departments going to that. Right now, we're kind of itemized. So it makes the billing process easier as well. And it falls more in line with insurance and the Medicaid, Medicare guidelines.
Gotcha.
That's certainly something we could look at. So in the capital budget for this year, we're looking to replace the current ambulance. It's 6 years old. It'll have over 100,000 miles on it. We would not get rid of it. It would go into reserve status. We would get rid of the current reserve ambulance. Our ambulances, we run 2,000 calls a year with the ambulance, and we transport well over 1,000 patients a year.
What happens to the reserve ambulance? I'm just curious.
It will get sold or traded in. It depends on where the value is. There's not a lot of value in it as an ambulance anymore, but still there is a certain amount of value for contractors like to buy them for work vehicles because they can haul a lot of tools and lock it up and things like that. So there is value there.
Resale market is good right now.
What's that?
The resale market in general is good.
You want to buy a used ambulance?
Talk to my employer.
Also in the capital budget for this year is the replacement of the cardiac monitor and defibrillators. And for those of you to remember the show Emergency, when they rub the paddles together and they say clear, and that is what we're talking about. It's really two tools built into one. One is the cardiac monitor, which shows the electrical tracings of the heart, and we can do 12 lead EKGs just like they would in the emergency room. And it also contains the defibrillator, which is our first line treatment in cardiac arrest. We were notified last year that as of December 31st this coming year, that our monitors would no longer be supported by Philips. And they would not be, we couldn't get parts or repairs on them or anything, so they will need to be replaced. This price includes a 5-year service agreement, which is something we were paying for annually in the past.
Oh.
So this price includes a 5-year service agreement, and we have also applied for a FEMA Fire Act grant to help offset the purchase. I'm fairly optimistic on this, and I'm knock on wood, we haven't been denied yet. And this is one of the priority categories for FEMA. It's a priority one. So hopefully we can come through with the at least 80% of this cost.
How many devices?
There will be 4. So there will be 1 on each piece of apparatus. We like my word apparatus.
I do.
So each fire truck would have one, the ambulance would have one, and then there would be a spare, which our goal is with apparatus and the ambulances that our spare can be placed into service just by moving personnel. So in the event of a mass casualty incident, or if we have some other natural disaster, we can just put that truck into service without having to move equipment around. So it's always ready to go. If something terrible happens, we get that ambulance, we can get it faster than a mutual aid ambulance or calling additional personnel in.
Chief, in terms of building health and safety, where do we have one located here?
I'm sorry?
Other than the fire station, where
Yes.
do we have defibrillator here?
AED, automatic external
Mhm.
defibrillators on the first floor by Public Works. There's one. What's that? Yeah, it's right along the wall there between, by the mailroom, between Public Works and the mailroom. Yeah, it's on the wall.
Okay, we might want to find it for sure. So is it?
Oh, I know where it is. You want me to show you? I was in.
Well, that makes the rest of us probably.
Yeah.
We might need some building training.
But yes, there is one on the wall. And
Perfect,
it gets checked monthly, so we know it's good.
thank you.
Okay. Also, this year is 27,500 for the continued gear replacement. And we started this prior to me being the chief. Fire gear was bought randomly out of the operational budget. And we started this program in order to make sure that everybody has 2 gears of NFPA compliant, 2 sets of NFPA compliant gear. And a perfect example of the importance of this was the chemical fire we responded to in Afton. When they came back with contaminated gear, they could have gear that was clean and ready to go while they got theirs washed or repaired. And the process is working very well. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so probably next year, everybody will have 2 sets of gear that's less than 8 years old. So we should be on a 4-year rotation after that. FY '23, we had 2 staff vehicles. One of those was pushed back from this year. I certainly don't have a problem with that. We have a very good maintenance program. Brad at City Garage does an outstanding job. The cars are well maintained. We can certainly put that one off until next year. We also have station alerting. This is something that's relatively new to us because they're making some changes at East Central with regard to station alerting. Station alerting is what tells us that there's an alarm inside the fire station. And I don't know how many of you have been there when the alarm came in, but it's a very loud, just constant tone horn. It's the same way at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, you go from laying in your bunk to hanging on the ceiling, back down to the floor, and then down the pole. It's quite alarming. Modern technology suggests that we can have lights that ramp up at certain levels. There's an audible alert before the alarm goes off. So it's a lot easier on you physically when it goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning. I believe that there is the possibility of some money coming from the ECC for the station alerting process, because we've been fighting that battle because that was in the ballot language.
Oh, here we go.
Oh.
Yes, that was in the ballot
Should see the
language.
Post-it note up here.
3 of them, one that says E, one that says C, and the other that says C, right? So yes, they are probably, hopefully, let's not say probably, hopefully going to take the RFP that ECDC had put out and piggyback to that. We'll see. Another knock on wood. But this would be for the in-house portion of it. Engine house number 2, I made it very clear to our architects, I wanted to be prepared to accept this modern technology. So we don't have to do a lot of retrofitting as we would at engine house 1. So that saves us a considerable. Here's the big one. FY 2024, the replacement of our aerial ladder. It's $1 million. And that is a very doable estimate, but it's also a very frugal estimate. Pattonville just brought an aerial ladder and it was $1.5 million.
Keep talking. If that's doable, why are we at 1.5?
We don't buy sexy,
Okay.
right?
You need to go to Pat.
Very practical,
See this truck.
gets the job done.
Yeah.
Firefighters are safe. Effective application, and we can do it for $1 million.
So what's the building height on that ladder?
That's a fair question.
That is a good point.
So that is a 78-foot ladder.
Okay, so how many stories is that?
Stories, 4. The problem with going bigger is you get into bigger chassis, bigger truck. When we had the 100-foot aerial ladder in the past, when I told you we changed the way we operate, we couldn't drive that truck down valley because it wouldn't make the turn.
So is that the next increment, the 100-foot ladder from 78?
Yes.
And what's that cost? Roughly.
Somewhere between 1 million and 1.5. But we have to, it has to be functional for us. That's the big thing.
Right.
No.
You have to be able to go through the streets.
Correct. This truck,
Right.
this design of truck, which we call a quint, combines an aerial ladder and a pump. So we are able to run this call like on EMS calls like we normally would. It carries all the equipment that EMS. When you get into bigger trucks, it makes them more difficult to navigate some of our cul-de-sacs. We end up backing out a lot with a larger truck. So I wouldn't want to go to a tandem axle truck. I don't think it would be nearly as effective for us.
So Chief, if in an alternative universe, Webster Groves decides to do a major redevelopment and build buildings that are 7-8 stories tall,
Okay.
would we need either a new truck or a developer to help us purchase a new truck in order to reach those buildings?
So you're never going to have an aerial ladder that's going to reach the top of every building. I mean, look at New York City, right? Downtown St. Louis, they have 100-foot aerial ladders. They have a quint, 75-foot quints, similar to our trucks, in every engine house. So you go with what serves the most, the best. New construction is going to be built to modern building code. Okay, we're going to have compartmentalization of the fire areas. We're going to have fully sprinkled buildings and adequate exits. So, I don't want to get caught in that, oh, we're building bigger buildings. Do we need a taller ladder? Up until the point where there's a certain number of buildings that ISO, the Insurance Service Organization, says, we're going to reduce you from an ISO class 2, then we might consider that as a benefit to our residents.
And that reclassification impacts our insurance rates? Is that
It
as
does.
homeowners? Yeah.
It does. More so for commercial and industrial than it does for residential.
What was
Want to back up on that?
what was that fire truck that we christened a few years ago?
That was the pumper that's at Engine House 2.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this is a replacement or an additional?
This is a replacement for the ladder that's at Engine House 1. Now, what I will say is when we built Engine House 2, I was very specific that I wanted it big enough to fit a ladder truck in, which was give us the option, weighing all things, maintenance costs, things like that, that we could keep this as a spare and have a spare aerial instead of a spare pumper, because this truck is capable of doing both.
What happens to it otherwise?
It would get sold or traded.
Little town in the middle of nowhere.
And in FY '25, last year, we put in the budget for an additional ambulance and the associated equipment. This is for equipment and not personnel. So
So we
this
would
is
have an additional personnel costs.
correct,
adding that.
correct. What I would plan is we purchase the ambulance and we apply for what's called a Safer Act grant. And that is typically a 3-year grant from FEMA for increasing staffing. And they pay $75.50, can be a descending amount each year until after 3 years, the city would absorb the full cost of the employees.
But I know that this is an odd year because no one predicted a pandemic, but our ambulance runs decreased this past year in 2020. And they really didn't go up that much over 2018 and 2019. Are we going to see an increase over the next 3 or 4 years that?
So our ambulance calls dropped off significantly during the early stages of the pandemic. Nobody wanted to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
In fact, everything you saw on TV discouraged people from going to the hospital. So yes, our EMS calls did drop off early on. We caught back up later in the year.
I guess, but I mean, is it gonna continue to rise, barring again a pandemic, is it gonna rise to the level where an additional ambulance and staff is gonna be necessary?
Currently, 18% of our EMS calls are run by out-of-town ambulances.
How does that compare to other communities?
We're high. We're definitely the highest user of mutual aid for EMS calls. It used to be Afton. They put another ambulance on.
Okay.
And it's a continuous cycle because, so we're out on an EMS call. We call Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury gets an EMS call, their ambulance is out, our ambulance is on the way back, so we're running Shrewsbury's call and it just keeps twisting around and it's, we're just a busy ambulance.
So if we put that, it's on my list for the 4.2 million, we put the ambulance on there, and you could apply for the grant for extra people and an extra person, and that's something we could consider for that
Sure.
4.2 million.
And
Although
I
what's
think
the
we're pretty reasonable.
timeline for, I think that's a year outside the, isn't it end of 24 that you have to have it spent?
Obligations have to be by the end of calendar year 24.
So you have time to do that.
But it wouldn't be necessarily, well, actually FY 25 budget.
You could-
Yeah, you're right.
You
I
can
was
buy,
getting
you can
the
buy it
years.
right now. As soon as we
Yeah.
put that, finish that firehouse number 2, then we have space for it. Right?
We do. We have space
That's
for
why
the
we-
ambulance and we have space for the personnel.
So that personnel, just so I'm clear, would be in addition to the 3 that you have at least recommended as a solution to the overtime?
Correct. Initially, when this was put into the budget, it was anticipated that we would hire 9 additional personnel. Seeing the problems with overtime and vacation usage, I propose we brought 3 on now and then the 6 on to actually staff the ambulance later.
And obviously, if we had fewer than 18% of our ambulance calls being used with mutual aid, we would increase our revenue from the ambulance fees that we.
That is correct. We do not bill for non-transport calls. I think we've been answering questions all along. Anybody have anything else?
Does anybody have a question? Because otherwise, is it time for us to take another 5-minute break?
12 minutes.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Boy. So, are you guys ready for a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's gonna run.
I'd like to stand up.
Run, 5 minutes. We're going to come back to our presentation this evening, and now we're going to hear from the Director of Public Works, Todd Ragg.
Hello. So mine is not as pretty as the police and fire. I didn't include pictures because you guys have your pictures in your CIP worksheet. So the first thing I did was start out with ticket items that are out of the ordinary in our operating budgets. So in the engineering administration side of Public Works, we have a new software that has to be purchased for our traffic counters. The traffic counter software that we have currently is no longer supported, and we cannot run our reports for our traffic counts, and the police department needs those. And they're waiting on our reports, and we can't run them until we get this new software. It's $1,600. It's a 2-seat license, and that is all we need because we only have one. Actually, we only need 1 seat, but it comes with 2. So that's our big ticket item in our engineering budget, $1,600. Ours is minuscule compared to police and fire. So next big ticket item. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
$1,600, they don't have to come to council for approval in the budget, do it.
No, I'm just pointing out the differences in my general
Oh, okay.
budget. They're out of the ordinary. Out of the ordinary. These are the out of the ordinary ticket items.
I was gonna say every dime needs to be approved by
Yes.
council.
Yes. So in our street maintenance budget, we have a big ticket item for our street excavations, which is an $80,000 line item. The reason it's that high is that we collect the deposits for our excavation permits, which you guys just recently raise the minimum deposit amounts. And those deposits were directly put into this account. And because of auditing purposes, they cannot do that anymore. So we need the money up front so we can pay for our materials to put everything back. But that money will get replenished back to the general fund when we collect our deposits throughout the year. In our snow and ice control, we were going to purchase 1,000 tons of salt, which is what we used in last winter. And that would have been a $72,000 purchase, but we are delaying that purchase. So next year, depending on how much I use in next winter, I may have to ask for double the amount next year. So just keep that in mind. And then we were going to get AVL for our trucks, like the police department has on their police vehicles, so that we would know where all of our trucks are at all times, especially in winter months when we are snow plowing. But we've taken that out of our budget also. So that was going to be $4,800. So we'll look at that in the future years. In our garage, which does the maintenance on all of our vehicles and equipment, we are asking for a $7,000 vehicle AC Freon upgrade machine, which will be used for the police vehicles to replenish their Freon instead of having us to have to take them to the dealer and get charged out of the wazoo by the dealership. So it's a piece of equipment that we can add to our garage and do it in-house. So. And then we have delayed the purchase of 2 big fans. Yes, that's what they're called. And the reason we're delaying that is because we're looking at enclosing the back side of the service center where the Parks Department works out of. They want to enclose that and put garage bay doors on that. Well, in the summer months, with that being open, he can open his man doors in his garage area and get a nice breeze blowing through there. With that being closed off, he'll no longer have that. So we'd need these fans to circulate air in there. But we're looking at probably doing that construction in the spring of next year. It's in this coming year's budget. We do the construction in the spring of the following year, and then we can look at putting these back in the budget next year. City Hall maintenance, we got 2 big items. As you know, our janitorial staff, that we used to have a staff person that was a city employee, but we're now contracting that out. And so our yearly contract fee for that is $46,800. So that's a bigger ticket item in there. And then our elevator maintenance, since we just upgraded the main elevator here at City Hall, it's under a 1-year warranty, so there's no maintenance costs. But then halfway through the year, it's going to kick in, so there'll be a 6-month cost of $1,350, and then the following year it'll be $2,700. So. The service center, we have operational equipment that we're looking at upgrading to a time clock system. Right now, the guys have to get on a laptop and log in. Each one has to do that. There's 16 guys. So it takes a while for them to each log in and clock in. So a time clock system, all they have to do is walk up, swipe their badge, and they clock themselves in. So it'll be quicker. And this is also to go along with the software that finance is using for tracking payroll stuff. So.
Like we're going back to the future here.
Yes. Yes. And then we have some building improvements. This is part of the building maintenance issues. Exterior tuck pointing and painting down at the service center hasn't been done since 2006. And we've got a price cost of $16,500 from a contractor to do that. I'm going to skip that one right now. So our capital improvements, I don't have the pictures because you guys have the CIP sheets. We have passenger fleet vehicles. We're replacing a 2010 Ford Escape for the building department. That's $26,000. We purchased these off of the state bid contract, so we get good prices for that. And we don't have to go out for bid because the state already goes out for bid, and the municipalities can jump onto that contract. But we're probably going to keep the 2010 Ford Escape for the departments for their new inspector that they're going to be getting. We're replacing our 2011 Freightliner single axle dump for $144,000. And we have 2 light duty dump trucks, which are 1.5 ton, dump trucks. They're 2012s that we're replacing for 172,750. That's for both of them together. And then we were going to replace one of our tractor loader backhoes. But we're delaying that purchase till next year. That's 127,000 that we're going to delay.
So can you go back?
Yep.
I'm sorry. What's the difference between a light duty dump truck and a regular dump truck?
Yep, the light duty dump truck is the 1.5 ton. The 2000, the single axle dump, I think is it's a 2 ton. It's a bigger truck. So the light duty dump trucks we use for our snow plowing of cul-de-sacs and residential streets. The bigger dump truck is used for the main roads, Lockwood, Elm.
Why is the light duty dump truck cheaper than the regular?
Well, no, they're not. There are 2 of them.
Oh,
We're purchasing 2 of them, so the total is 172,000. So they're what, 80.
Does our
86,000 a piece.
Parks and Rec department have dump trucks?
Yes, they do. And they replace theirs when they need to. Scott says they only have 1.
You have 1. Is it not compatible where we could use it for both streets and Parks and Rec?
Well, we use ours for daily for our jobs, for hauling rock and dirt to the job sites, pulling trailers behind them. And then in the winter months, then we hook them up with snow plows and salt spreaders.
Do we have other dump trucks?
We have more. I think we have 3 of the single axle dumps, and then I think we have 4 of the 1.5 ton dumps.
Okay. So we are to a degree rotating when we
Yes,
replace
yeah,
them.
right. Mhm. Right. We try to replace them every 7 to 8 years. So these are 2011, 2012, or 9 and 10 year trucks. So, well, actually, they're like 10 and 11 year trucks for next year. So next couple things we have is office stuff. We've got the planning and development office reconfiguration. We're creating new spaces for the employees and extra offices back in the back area, and addressing safety issues for the director's office. Because where her door is right now, anybody can go into her door. We'll close that off and put a new door going into the back area where these new offices are going to be. And we got a price for that. I think it was like 46,000. So I bumped it up to 50. Just
Todd, would you
coming up.
talk about I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Talk about the potential move.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted me to say that.
Yeah, there's no
So
secret.
this may not happen because we're looking at reconfiguring things here at City Hall. The biggest thing is Public Works offices. We're looking at moving our offices down to the service center. And so then that frees up our whole half of the building. And our area is bigger than the planning and development side. So they would switch over and move over to our side, giving them more room. And then their area would be converted into the IT office areas and HR.
That's correct. So you have a total of 5 staff, including yourself, that would move to
Yes.
the service center.
All right, so there's 3 offices down at the service center. 2 of the offices can hold 2 people. And then I would be in the last office, which currently is a weight room. So they're gonna move the weights to the basement. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna be able to fit all my desks and stuff in there. So.
There is a loss in terms of not having Todd and his staff here.
Yeah, well, you guys are gonna miss my face, my
You-
pretty face.
Absolutely. However, it's been neat watching the teams come together and talk about how those same services would still be applied, and using the magnet system to greater capacity to create efficiencies so that they can discuss things back and forth and
And
look
for our
at same
permits,
document.
for on the permit side and that, we could be able to do them across the computer rather than having to be in person.
Which would be good. And as he said, his space, public workspace in City Hall is markedly bigger than where Mara's staff currently is. So that would allow some more efficiencies on their side as well. And we're hoping.
She's running out of room, so.
She has ran out of room. We are hoping with these moves, while there still would be some cost, there's not as many structural changes. So hopefully that cost would be lower than the 50,000 as well. So it'd create efficiencies and be cheaper.
Right. Yeah, we would have to do the door probably. That would be HR's office.
Thank you.
So then I talked about the service center enclosure. So the back garage part, if you're familiar with the service center, the front part as you come in, when you're driving through the gate, that's the street department side. And then the back side is the parks department works out of. And so they've been wanting to enclose that side with garage door bays, so that they can have an enclosed area to work out of in the winter months. So right now it's just all open. And when they're out doing work in the winter time, they're out there in their winter clothes trying to keep warm. So, and so our engineer's estimate is 250,000 for that. So we'll be bidding that out, and hopefully we'll come in under the 250. And then the elevator down at the rec center is due for its modernization, like we did here at City Hall, because it's the same type of elevator. It's a long elevator, and we can no longer get parts for it. So it needs to be brought up to the current modernizations that are out there. So, and that's 100,000 estimated.
That's what I was like.
Underneath the
where's that elevator?
stairs. It's kind of.
Yeah, I
underneath the
didn't know
stairs
they
at
had
the
one
ice
either.
rink.
I've never even noticed.
Nobody knows that there's one down there.
Oh, I do.
It's in the ice rink. It goes from the lobby up to the grandstand in the ice rink.
And it looks like it could have been retired 10 years ago.
That's why it needs to be brought up to modernization. Other capital improvements we got coming up, Big Bend Boulevard Crossroads. I'm sure you've heard of this project that Marlo's been working on with the district. They've been trying to get grants for it. And so in next year's budget, we had their portion of the grant. So we're upping that to the total amount of construction, which is 288,570. That's to upgrade the sidewalks, pedestrian safety with crosswalks, some bump outs for the parking. And we're gonna put in, if when we do these upgrades, then we're gonna put in the conduits, because then in the following year, I have budgeted for the decorative street lights to go in. And so if we have the conduits in place, then all we have to do is put the light standards in, run the wires and hook them all up. So. Then our mill and overlay program is 775,000 for this year. And then our annual chip seal program is 176,294. It's based off of Paul's estimates. So that's why that's a goofy number. Yes.
Can I ask you about the Big Bend Crossroads? You know, a long time ago, we looked at the actual intersection,
Yeah.
which now
At Big
is
Bend and Elm.
at Big Bend and Elm, and with all these sixth graders going to Hickson now,
Yeah.
that is so dangerous because those kids have to stand in the middle of the road to cross the road. Can we do something? at that
County,
intersection?
St. Louis County will not let us do what we want to do at that intersection. It's their intersection.
Yeah, but we used to meet with them and they were all for doing something.
We've met with them how many times? And they've put their foot down. They won't let us do what we want to do to the intersection. So we're going to do everything else that we can to upgrade that district, except for that intersection.
Okay.
If you got pulled with somebody in St. Louis County.
Please.
Yeah, it's a long email.
Having lunch with Lisa Clancy, so we send that.
Yeah, we'll give it a try.
So I didn't put in my capital that I do have in to do City Hall painting. The first floor is 28,000. And then to do the second floor the following year is like, I think it's 18,000 or something like that. So, 15.2 for the following year. So, so that's part of the building maintenance program that we're looking at right now. We've painted the police department because they needed theirs painted, because with all their holsters and stuff, they keep banging the walls and scraping the walls, putting their feet up on the wall. And it's 22 years since, yes. And that's, however, when we were painting it, their officers kept scraping them up and the guys had to keep touching it up. Anyway.
So Todd, how old is the paints for first and second floor?
So when the renovation was done in 2002, so it has not been touched since then.
20 years.
Maybe an office has been touched here or there, but that's about it.
So it costs another,
It's 28,800 to do all of first floor and then 15,200 to do up here.
any reason why we wouldn't do all that together?
Because we have a $2.5 million deficit.
Yeah, because I didn't want to add to the
That's
shortfall.
not a lot. You're gonna create or repair.
Well, because we have a $1 million fire truck that we gotta be buying. So,
Yeah, we can't just do everything.
No, we just can't do everything. It just makes common sense. If you're gonna paint the downstairs floor, by the time you paint the upstairs, the downstairs, it's probably gonna be painted again.
I hope
And
not.
then, you know, if you're doing infrastructure,
Well,
City Hall, do
it-
you look at the age and the carpet? I
If
mean,
it-
it's just.
If it needs to be painted again, it won't be Public Works' fault because we'll be at the service center. Yes, I had to get that in there. Okay, my last big thing is we are currently under design for the replacement of the culvert at Elm and Kirkham. The reason being is that MoDOT put a weight restriction on it at our last bridge inspection, which we do every 2 years. So we had to post it for a weight limit. So we decided, well, I think it's time to look at getting it replaced. So the design is underway right now. The culvert that is there right now is way undersized. That's why Kirkham floods all the time. So they're proposing to put in a triple box culvert, which will handle the 100-year flood. And their estimated cost is 1.25 million. I think I can get that down because a lot of the things after the culvert is replaced, the street has to be put back in. Well, it's a concrete street. Our street department can do concrete streets. So I think we can put the street back in, the sidewalk curbs back in, the concrete median island that's there, put that all back in. So that'll take a couple $100,000 off of that estimate of cost. The only thing is my engineer's like, well, I've never bid anything like with somebody else doing that. What kind of work? I said, you just put work by others. It's simple. So.
So can I ask, again, in that alternative universe where we go forward with a redevelopment and we have a river walk, is this going to be at all, would it be at all advantageous to talk to the developer to determine exactly what would be beneficial for them?
Well, this is further down from them.
Yeah, but isn't it, it's all one stream?
Correct. Yeah, it's the same creek. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I just
It's
wondered.
Shady Creek.
So I guess what I'm asking, is there any way that we can shuffle some of the cost onto that?
Probably not because it's, like I said, it's further downstream from them.
What about Brentwood? It's got to be Brentwood bound impactful a little bit, right? No.
Well, it's going to get the water down to Brentwood quicker
Well, okay.
by putting in a triple box than what's theirs now. So.
Okay, never mind.
And I have a picture of it in there. I don't know if you've seen the picture in there. It's a corrugated metal culvert right now and it's starting to fail.
So was Newport a typo in our, or does the Newport?
No, the Newport project is being built. Well, it's going to be we've got the contract. You guys approved the contract.
Okay.
It's all been signed by Dr. Peoples has signed it. So all I have to do now is get with the contractor and find out when they're ready to start and give them notice to proceed. So that one's ready to go. And that one is not a complete replacement. They're not digging it up. They're going to put a lining inside of it because it was not structurally failing. It just needed to be.
Okay,
And-
so
and-
all the
and by
bridge
putting this-
improvements, that will not be disturbed by what?
Correct.
Yeah,
The
okay.
road pavement will not be touched because they're
Okay.
going to be doing it all from one end
Okay.
of the culvert.
Thank you.
This seems like the sort of thing we should be able to get a grant for.
Yeah,
Try anything?
there are possibilities to get it, but it's pretty slim on a culvert project because it's not considered technically it's not considered a bridge because it's not elevated.
It's elevated.
It's elevated over the creek.
No, I said, let's just elevate it.
Oh, yeah, elevated.
So, Todd, that brings me to a larger question.
Yeah.
Which is, what's our strategy in terms of, how do we monitor what grants are available, what we can
Mhm.
do, especially in light of, and this may be a question for Eric as well, you know, last administration was infrastructure week every other week. It looks like it might be a little more possible this administration that there'll be an infrastructure bill. And I just, what are we doing to be ready if there is one to make sure we can go get whatever money we can from it?
Yeah, we work with East West Gateway. They send out, you know, this is the next round is going to be coming up. This is what they're going to be looking for projects. And if we don't have anything that's going to fit in there, we don't bother with it then. But if it does have something like, if it would have a culvert, then yeah, we could throw this in there. But since we already started design, we probably wouldn't be able to qualify. Anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not worried as much about this particular project, but how comprehensive is East West Gateway in terms of cataloging the available opportunities? I guess that's my question.
They're on top of it. Yeah,
Okay.
they get it through the state. Who gets it from the feds? That's the last thing I have. Anybody have any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks. You know, I do have a question.
Yes.
Because you have, there's a big salary increase in the 03 street maintenance on page 188.
That's a payout for a retirement. We got a retirement coming up.
So
He's retiring in what, August?
it's like $75,000 more than the estimate for this year. I'm on page 188. The salaries, take a look at that. The budget for last year was 659,000.
Yeah, it's
This
725.
year, 645,000, but next year is 725,000. It's an increase. It's quite a big increase. And I was just curious, are you adding a person or
No,
how
no.
did that happen?
No, actually, we just lost a person.
But what accounts for an extra $75,000?
I don't put the salaries in. I can't answer that.
So as Marlene looks, and thank you asking for Mayor, those are excellent questions. Just to say again for the record, the employee positions have been stagnant. The history of Webster Groves has not been adding staff. So that I like all of these questions. They're good. It shows us where we need to dig into it more and really capture what's happening with the salaries increases. But a lot of it really is the payouts. As you said, you've lost a staff person rather than add one.
Our most recent hire, because of our compensation study that needs to be done, our starting salary is $2 less than any other municipality in the St. Louis area. So when we hire somebody at the starting salary, they're looking for another job immediately, and he found another job with MSD, so he's leaving. He's been there just under a year. Just under a year. And he was a heck of a worker too.
We're struggling with salaries, and I know that's not what council wants to hear. It's not what I want to say, considering the salary implications we have, but we're hiring and retaining people is very difficult. And I think that's really shows in terms of the police chief sharing that, you know, he's had 6 vacancies. Not only is finding quality recruits difficult, but the hiring is difficult. And maybe not so much in police and fire. The increases that you all have made in the past have helped that tremendously. But when we're talking other departments and staff, it's tough.
I know. Public Works has been really tough. I know you guys.
When you're rolling staff over that much, it becomes more expensive.
It's expensive to recruit, to hire, to
hire.
Exactly. Training. He's gone through his CDL training. He passed his written test, but he didn't do the driving yet. So he'll have to do the driving with MSD. So
we're not going to wish him luck on that. Just.
Okay,
Did you
thank
find
you,
it?
Todd. We're
Thank you.
working on why we have an extra 75,000. That's on my list.
I'm hoping he's not getting that much of a payout.
Yeah, it looks like the payout's like 6,000. So 700. My number that's here, I don't have the full sheet because we're adjusting things. It's not the 725, so I'm wondering if that's. I need to go back and find my sheet before I did.
Have that. Okay, we'll figure it out. But let's go on.
Mr. Davis. Good evening.
Greetings, everyone. Parks and
Greetings.
Recreation time. Let's see if I can. So So we're gonna go through a quick table of contents. You don't really need to see too much. Funding sources, some fees, and then we'll jump into all our expenses. So funding sources first. We have quite a few funding sources with Parks and Recreation. We do have the Parks Improvement Fund, which was the half-cent sales tax that was passed in 1989. 80% of that goes to park improvements and 20% to stormwater. In a typical year, you can see right here that we do about 1.1 million in revenue on that fund. For fiscal year 22, we're estimating just over 900,000. So that sales tax dollars are still down, COVID related. Over the last 4 fiscal years, that fund typically has funded about 66% of our park operations. We're bumping that up to 76% for next fiscal year. The majority of that is we're reallocating some salaries from general fund to the park improvement fund to free up those funds in the general fund. Park balance is pretty healthy right now. General fund, all of our recreation expenses comes out of the general fund, and some park expenses come out of the general fund. We're approximately 17%. Fees, we are paid to play facilities and recreation. So we account for about 13% of the general fund revenues. In my business, we like to talk about cost recovery out of our rec complexes. Most cities are in the 80 to 85% cost recovery. We have historically been higher than that. You can see in 17, we were at 94%, fiscal year 18, 102%, fiscal year 19, 99%. But then we've really taken a hit the last 2 years, 72% last year. I'm estimating 62% cost recovery this year. I'm hoping to bring that back up to about 93% next year, but we'll get to a little bit more on the fees when we get to that screen here in a little bit. Grant funds, we have significant grant funding available to the Parks and Recreation Department. Most of that comes through a dedicated sales tax through Municipal Park Grant Commission. That's a county-wide sales tax. That money is divided up. Some of it goes to St. Louis County, some of it goes to Great Rivers Greenway, and then a third of it goes to municipalities that can get it through this grant commission. Typically, we can expect to receive $475,000 out of that grant fund every other year, which is a very healthy amount. And then business district transfers, we do landscaping, holly decorations for the city's business districts. They collect a tax and then they transfer that money to the Parks and Recreation or the general fund, Parks and Recreation, to cover that. And then capital improvement, which isn't on there. So fees. Next year, I'm estimating fees at $1.8 million. You can see our ice rink is our cash cow, brings in the most amount of money for us by far. There are very few ice rinks in the area, so the dollars are quite high for rental fees on that. And then recreation, that's camps.
Can we hold on to ice arena for a second?
Sure.
Have you seen any impact of the opening of there's been a couple of facilities in the last couple of years?
Not really. Actually, our ice rink was very healthy this year.
Yeah.
It was one of the few things that really held up or even got better during COVID. Don't know why that is, but it's been very healthy. The next slide will show our year-over-year costs on those. So I'm really
Is
not.
our hourly rental fee, how does that stack up with some of the other?
We're right in line. We constantly do checks with all the other cities on what they're allocating and charging. You guys have given us authority to go up to $250 an hour for rental fees. Our usual rental fees are in the $210 range for our long-term rentals that do a whole lot of hours. They get a little bit better rate than just a one-off rental. So our fees are real healthy, but they're in line with everybody else.
Thank you.
I'm going to pop over to the next screen, and this shows the last couple of years worth of fees and revenues that we've brought in. So you can see this first one, ice rink, we're very healthy. We're above fiscal 19, which was the last pre-COVID year. Recreation, we're down a little bit off of that, but still in pretty good shape. Aquatics, we weren't open at the end of fiscal year 20 and beginning of fiscal year 21. So those numbers are lower. I'm estimating that comes back up for fiscal year 22 and be pretty much in line with pre-COVID numbers. The fitness center is our big hit right now. Nobody wants to work out with a mask. We've been at lower occupancy levels until last week when the new reopened STL order came out. We're still at 6 foot social distancing, which impacts the amount of cardiovascular equipment that's available. Those are typically stacked right on top of each other, a foot apart. So you still have to be 6 feet apart. So every other machine is in use and the other ones are out of service right now. So fitness classes are also included in that. We're just not seeing people. We're having trouble finding instructors that want to teach classes. We're having trouble finding participants that want to take the classes that instructors are willing to teach. So where we might have 12 people in a pre-COVID class, we might have 4 or 5 right now. So those numbers just aren't coming back. I'm hoping to get that number up. Reopen STL helped. Being able to have restrooms and locker rooms and shower services available in the last couple of weeks is helping. And a lot of our memberships are full facility memberships. So when the aquatic center closed, we also lost fitness center revenue. So with the aquatic center being back open this year and the fitness center getting closer to normal levels, I'm hoping that we will see a lot of those full facility memberships come back, and that money is kind of divvied out to each one of these separate allocation sources.
Can I ask, where does gym rental, is that in fitness center or recreation?
Gymnasium would go into recreation.
Okay.
Actually, pretty much all of our rentals, meeting room rentals, gymnasium rentals are in the recreation category.
Is this on Jenny Starkey's list? I mean, it seems to me that we're gonna have to really let the public know that things have changed and you're welcome and we want you to come and here's what it's gonna be like. You can take a shower now.
Yeah. So we are working on that right now. It seems like every time we put something out, it changes on us.
Yeah.
So we put out our aquatics COVID operations plan on Friday, and then the Monday the county put out the reopen STL order, which nullified half of the operations plan that we put out on Friday. So we have a lot of areas and each one has a different guideline with county, and they also don't put them all out at the same time. So Wednesday might be a fitness center update, Friday might be an aquatics update, Monday might be a restaurant update, which impacts our concession stand. So we need to get that information out there, but it has been a bit of a struggle to stay up to date and relevant information.
Your fitness center members have at least stayed pretty constant over this past year. So this says, 2019 was 1706. This year it's 1629. It's where you really fell off was the fitness program participants.
Yeah. Programs have definitely fallen off. I would say our memberships have fallen off. Those numbers may not fully reflect that because we still haven't recaptured a lot of those folks. A lot of those members happen January 1. It's kind of your bread and butter in fitness centers is you sell memberships for New Year's resolutions, and 80% of those people work out for a month and then they don't come back. I hate to say that, but that's just industry standard. Fitness classes are down, personal training services are down. Anything that has to do with fitness is down right now, but it is starting to recover and come back.
This is more of a general question for everyone. I think, are we tracking the employees that have received the COVID vaccine or have refused to receive the COVID vaccine?
I have not been tracking that. I would say that most of my employees have gotten it. I think pretty much all of my full-time rec staff have got it. There was a few parks staff that have not or did not want to, but my staff was clamoring to go get it. And I drove to Cape Girardeau to get it. I had a bunch of other staff that drove out of county to go get it. So I think most of them even wanted to.
Is the same true in fire and police, do you think?
I'd say we're about 85%.
Also.
Also. So those fees are down a little bit. Our typical fees, back up a slide. Our typical fees have been over $2 million a year. So getting back to the 1.8 for next fiscal year is approaching a normal fiscal year 19, last COVID year for us, but it is still down a bit. We took that into account when we put together our expenses. We don't really operate as a enterprise fund, but I kind of treat it as such because I know how much money we bring in fees, and I try to keep our expenses in line with that. So we've tried to reduce staffing during times because we've had less people in there. We've got full-time staff working part-time shifts and things of that nature to try to keep our expenses in line. Park Improvement Fund is our. So fiscal year starting balance, we're looking at just over $1.3 million. Expenses about 1.1 million, and estimated tax revenue at 900,000, which would be about an 81% cost recovery for this fund. As you can see, of the largest portion of this fund is salary and benefits for our employees. Again, this year we transferred, previous I had 50% of my salary was in recreation and 50% was in Park Improvement Fund. We put 100% of my salary in Park Improvement this year. We moved our park superintendent, took her 100% of her salary to the Park Improvement Fund. So we are trying to shift some monies to this fund, free up general fund expenses. Capital outlay is a big one. When this sales tax was passed by the residents, the largest portion was to go out to our parks, to renovate our parks, to do good things in our parks, and then to staff those new good things in the parks. But you can see at the ending balance, ending fiscal year 22, we're still estimating 1.1 million, which is about 12 months worth of reserves. That's a pretty healthy balance, and there's certainly availability there to spend some more money if there's programs and events that you guys would like to see. That being said, let's discuss the three big projects that we have for this year. I know there's going to be some questions on these. It might be easier if I can run through these three projects and give you the details in the background, and then we can discuss priorities of those projects or different funding mechanisms for them. The first one is the fitness studio and meeting room. So this is the recreation complex. This box right here would be where the new fitness studio meeting room would be. Might not be exactly that big. This was the original diagram from the drawings of the building before it was built. It was an area that was originally designed into the rec complex and was pulled out of the construction of the rec complex due to funding back in I guess it wasn't 94, it was the newer, okay, 2010. It's something that can certainly be needed. We don't currently have a dedicated fitness studio. We have a very small, we call it a studio room. It can only hold about 8 people. It's not really big enough for the majority of our classes. So our classes end up using our meeting room space. If you have classes in meeting room, then you can't have meetings in the meeting room. So we're losing out on potential revenue and services to our residents to provide them meeting room space. The goal for this would be that, as you can see, these lines here are the dividing walls, movable walls inside the meeting rooms. My goal would be to have this wall also be a movable wall so that you could use the wooden dance floor of the aerobic studio as a dance floor for a wedding reception. That would allow us to have wedding receptions up to maybe 300 persons, which captures a whole nother segment of the market for us, and for many community centers is quite a revenue boost. It's a pretty expensive project though. We're looking at about $600,000 for this project. We can do $475,000 of that in the Muni Park Fund and the other $125,000 out of the Park Improvement Sales Tax Fund. This has been in the CIP plan for 5 years moving forward, but I do have some concerns right now with COVID and fitness usage. Is this the perfect time to do this? It will be 18-ish months to build the design and build this. We don't have construction documents on it yet. We would go out for the Muni Park grant in August of this year. We'd be notified if we got that grant, which I believe we would, in end of October. Then we'd go out for design and then building. So we probably wouldn't open until summer of 2023. That's a long time from now. Hopefully COVID will all be gone by then, please, please, please. And so by that point, we might be back. But I do have some concerns about building something that I don't need today.
I do too.
Yep. That being said, with the muni park grants, I budget those out for 5+ years down the road. If we don't do it this year, I can't do it the next couple of years because I've got the pool coming up and I've got them already dedicated to that pool renovation. And so this would get kicked multiple years down the road if we don't do it this year.
Do you know, the alternative to be able to use that for good rental space might justify it for now, even if it doesn't work for a fitness center, because there's no place in town for a large venue, and I can see this being very desirable.
I would agree with that. Right now, we could do 200 people max. So by having that as a dance floor and that an extra 2,000 square foot, you're definitely coming up to that 300.
Pretty windows in the front.
Right.
Set that, yeah, I think that may justify some of that. And especially if most of it's going to be paid for through the Muni Park grant. Go for it.
It's a good use for that money, but there may be other projects. So the next project up is a potential new park. This is the old McDonald's property at the corner of Big Ben and Oxford. And Great Rivers Greenway has purchased this property from the McDonald's Corporation. They now own the property. You can see the end of the greenway right here. Currently it ends and goes right out into Oxford Boulevard. Great Rivers Greenway wants to or needs to continue this greenway down to the intersection. They approached both the cities of Maplewood and Webster Groves because this property is in both Maplewood and Webster. They approached both the cities to see if we wanted to join them on renovating this space and having a joint park or what have you. Maplewood declined that option. Mara and I, when we met with them, thought it would be a good idea. We originally had planned to bring this to council last year. We got this January, February. But once COVID started hitting and our budget turned upside down, Steve and I chose to not even bring this before council because it is potentially a fairly large ticket item. We haven't done any design work. We have no plans yet with GRG. So this dollar amount is just solely a placeholder. It could be 0. It could be 5 million. I don't know what it'll be because we haven't designed anything yet. So coming before you tonight and discussing this, there's several different options that we can go with. And I wanted to just show a quick little rundown of some of these additional spaces and parks. And I presented this to the park board too, so I'll give you kind of their recommendation. Tomorrow, I'll switch my screens real quick for me. Thank you. So this is that property, a couple different images. This is again the Google image. This is going southbound on Big Bend. So you can see this property would be right where this semi truck is right now. It is the intersection and lead in into Webster. So it is could be a very visible corner. It's about 1.25 acres.
Is that technically Webster property?
It is in the city limits of Webster and Maplewood.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, say that again.
Line, was
The-
McDonald's like right down?
Yeah. So the line goes,
I thought our line ended at Key West. I didn't realize that.
the line kind of goes right through here if I'm,
Oh,
you know.
wow.
So this portion would be Maplewood, but this portion is Webster Groves.
And Maplewood has already said no.
They've said no, that they weren't interested in potentially owning it and maintaining it in perpetuity. 1.25 acres. So here's a couple. So here's the GRG map. This arrow right up here is where that property is. It's at the end of the Deer Creek Greenway that we have right now. Maplewood or Great Rivers Greenway's next project or next phase of that trail is to take it on this dotted line up into the city of St. Louis to Francis Slay Park, where it would meet the River to Pear Greenway, which comes all the way down this way. which would connect to the Graveway Greenway, which a lot of people call Grants Trail. That comes all the way back up into Crestwood and Kirkwood. And then they've got future plans to continue that back down to Webster. Here's Larson Park, and then finishing down at Lorraine Davis Park where the current greenway ends. When they would complete those other two sections, you'd be looking at about a 22-mile loop that residents could jump on to ride their bike or jog around if they were crazy enough to jog 22 miles in one day. I'm not doing that.
What was the time frame on that again, that they're hoping for?
They're in the process of design right now and discussing with Maplewood this portion into the city. These phases right here are still years down the road. We're actively talking to them. I keep trying to push them since we finished our last section of our greenway. We're ready to go in the next section, but they needed to go do some projects in other parts of the city or county rather. So this is one potential park that I found that is similar, that I kind of like as a sample. Again, these are just samples, random things that I found as potentially what could go there. This is 2.25 acres, so it's just a little bit larger. It's Central Green Navy Yards in Philadelphia. Some of the cool features of that, it's got the kind of the greenway running through, lots of seating, some sort of time clock that people could time themselves as they ran or walked down the trail. All the different circles in that main picture are different areas of fun. You got ping pong, you've got an area that you can just casually relax in some hammocks, workout station. This area could be kind of neat, kind of an amphitheater type spot. I ran some decibel settings down there on that park this week, and the decibel levels are pretty low. They're in the high 60s, mid 60s, even with traffic. So it's actually quieter than you would think. There could be a spot for future concert venues if you did something cool like that. This is the Lawn on D in Boston. I've been there and I thought this was really cool. I'll show you a quick little video. These are just swings that you can get on, and as you swing, they change colors at night. It's also kind of an astroturfed area, where they have a lot of yard games and things like that. But it could be visually appealing on that roadway as an entrance into Webster. I'm not going to show you the whole video. This is a sculpture that's actually in Japan, but from a distance, it's very sculptural and artistic. And then as you get closer to it, you can see that the art piece is actually a playground as well that kids can climb on and explore around in. This is a park down in downtown Atlanta called Woodruff Park. It's a custom ATL playground. So from a distance, it just looks like a nice sculptural, ATL symbol. We could do something similar with a WG or something like that, where you'd have slides coming down the side of the W. There's climbing walls that up. This is the rear of that sculpture, so you can see different climbing features and ADA transfer stations and such for that playground.
Would Maplewood give us this land?
Maplewood doesn't own it. G owns it.
Oh.
G bought it from McDonald's. So G is the owner of the land free and clear. They want to renovate it, and it would be much the same as they did with the Marshall Avenue Trailhead, where we joined them to renovate that property, and then they donated the parcel over to the city as a park once construction was complete.
So we would
boundary adjustment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would be owning land in the municipalities. Boundary then?
We would have a second park that's in another municipality. We already have at least one that shares boundaries with another municipality. Maplewood is, given a handshake type agreement that they don't want to do anything with it, and they're fine with us doing it and putting whatever on it that GRG and we would like. Last option would be, could be a cool spot for a skate park, some sort of plaza type park that doesn't have huge bowls or elevated stuff very much. You'd have some steps and rails, things you can slide around, but mostly ground level stuff. So GRG is, flip me back, Mark, to the regular presentation, please. GRG is interested in working with us. They have quite a few donors that they feel that they would be able to reach with some of those pieces, something similar like that. But again, we have no we haven't designed it. Haven't sat down with them yet. So the question would be, do we want this property? And if so, what would be our vision towards this property, which would kind of determine budgeting and resources for that property.
Scott, what's the square footage of the area?
It's 1.2 acres.
And would the development portion of it be back beyond into the trees that you see, or it would be totally isolated to what we see available there?
Deer Creek is inside this tree line. So the tree line probably is 20 foot or so to top of stream bank. So you might be able to capture some of that. It's mostly honeysuckle. So we would likely remove a lot of that honeysuckle.
Goats, yeah.
Goats.
With goats, yes.
Can we just put goats there? Could that be?
That would be an attraction to go.
Yeah. Webster loves goats, apparently.
So,
I honestly forgot there was.
Are you gonna tell them about the Parks and Rec
oh yes,
recommendation?
thank you.
Yeah, that was a
So
good conversation.
I showed that same presentation to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and they really liked the ATL or the WG type of playground. I did go out and get a cost from that, since that is an actual playground that I could find numbers on. That was about $250,000 to $300,000 in 2010 when it was built. It's a custom piece. Anytime you get a custom piece, you're going to pay for it. But again, since it is a somewhat architectural, sculptural piece, GRG would probably be able to help with finding donors for it, as well as GRG has money to put towards this project if we do it with them.
What are the timeline?
Given the timeline on GRG,
Well, they're
it
ready.
always takes forever.
They're ready to go on it. Like I said, they purchased this property last year and they wanted to start the development of it last year with us. And we chose not to bring it before you because it was the beginning of COVID and an upside down budget. They're ready to move forward. They have money budgeted in their current fiscal year for design. They're ready to hit the ground with us to start the design process if it's something that we're willing to do. That means construction would likely happen next calendar year. I'm not sure how that would cross our fiscal year, but I would think it would most likely be completed by the end of calendar year 22.
And do you have capacity to take on another park once completed, Scott?
Yes, certainly depending on what it is. There are definitely different maintenance needs depending on what is designed and put in there. That would be something that we would take into consideration, but it's only an acre. So it's not it's not another Blackburn Park. You know, it's a fairly smallish property.
In Maplewood's an absolute no-go. It's not like we can reconvene that conversation, especially with the new mayor.
It certainly could if we wanted to design something with them and share the park and figure out how we would share resources to maintain it. Quite frankly, I think it would be easier just to do it ourselves. We would also likely, that ATL wouldn't be a big WG if Maplewood was involved too. So yeah. So depends on what you want to design or how you want it to look. I think we would get more impactful park visually on that high impact Big Bend Boulevard as an entrance to Webster if we were to do it ourselves. You could put it backwards. So, oh, never mind. See it in your rearview mirror. I shouldn't have said that. I actually like that art piece. I'm sorry. I apologize. Moving on, unless there's other questions on that, we'll come back to that. Oh, sorry. The next project that we have funds in our park improvement capital for this year is Ivory Crockett. I was looking at this park and trying to program out the most impactful way to do this park with different revenue sources. For years, we used CDBG funding in Ivory Crockett Park. I can find it all the way back to 2003 up through 2015. We allocated about $15,000 or more a year to the park. And then county changed their maps in 2015 relative to the 2010 census data and said that Ivory Crockett Park was no longer in the service region for CDBG funding. They came back and changed that again in 2018, as we all knew that that map wasn't correct. They amended that map in 2018. So Ivory Crockett is available for CDBG funding again. The last few years, council has wanted to push the $40,000 of CDBG funding towards the home improvement loan program for residents, which is a cornerstone piece of that funding. But there is dollars that could be pushed towards the park if we wanted to use those to enhance that park. So total need for this park to replace the lion's share of the structures that are there is about $330,000. So I was looking at about 90,000 in CDBG funding with 15,000 for most years, 40,000 in fiscal year 24, and then 20,000 again in fiscal year 26. So 22 would replace the basketball, not replace, it would mill and overlay the current basketball courts and remove the tennis court, which hasn't had a tennis net on it in a couple years. Does have a shorter basketball goal for children on that tennis court right now. Fiscal year 23 would replace playground equipment. Fiscal year 24 would replace playground equipment and remove the 2 non-matching pavilions that are there now and put in one larger, nicer matching pavilion. And then fiscal year 25 is to replace the pathway that goes around the ball field, remove that out, mill that asphalt out and replace that with concrete. And then fiscal year 26 is to mill and overlay and replace the parking lots on both sides of the park.
Sorry.
Scott, why so long to redo the walking path? Seen the condition of that walking path?
I have.
I thought
This
it
is
was
the-
on last year's when we did Blackburn. I thought that the budget said Blackburn and Ivory Crockett. I thought that.
No, it was split out that Blackburn was last year and Ivory Crockett was for a couple years down the road. This is the picture of that path. There are some significant alligatoring of that asphalt and cracks, running laterally across the path.
What's going to replace the tennis courts?
Currently green space, more green space to the park. When we do the playgrounds, that could be, add more playground equipment. That could be a spot for more of that playground equipment as it wraps around the
Is there
bathhouses.
potential for like any kind of fountain playground kind of thing in there?
A water
Or is it-
feature?
Yeah.
Certainly could be.
Have you thought about repairing the tennis court and offering some kind of tennis program?
I have not. We have too many tennis courts in town. We have 15 tennis courts.
Well, we don't have anyone that far down.
It's true. We've got 2 at Larson.
Where are the other 15 courts?
There's 8 at Memorial Park at the rec complex. There's 2 at Blackburn, 2 at Larson, 2 at Barnacle, and 1 at Ivory Crockett. So you'd have the 2 at Larson and the 2 at Barnacle would be the closest.
It could be the
Ivory
only
Crockett.
water feature. That'd be cool.
Well, my concern is the, one is the walking. I mean, it's in bad shape. So it's a hazard of anything. And how long has it been that way?
It has significant cracking. It's, I couldn't tell you when that path was put in. I don't have a timeline on it. It was prior to me being here 8 years ago, but for instance, Blackburn's was a 20-year-old path that's being replaced now. I would imagine Ivory Crockett is probably in that same neighborhood of 15 to 20 years for that path.
Scott, is the Larson tennis court still part of this? I mean, it's in our book as such, but
It's not part of this. It's in capital improvement fund.
Oh, yeah, so
It
you
is-
haven't gotten there yet.
I haven't gotten there.
All right, I'll
It
wait
is-
till you get there.
It is still in the CIP fund, not the park improvement fund.
I'm having difficulty with the amount of funds that we're putting in this park.
Well, especially if we're going to talk about spending significantly more
Yes.
short-term on a new park when the one we have needs maintenance.
Yes.
I mean, the total dollar is 330,000 for that. It is over 5 years, but that $330,000 is a significant amount for any of our parks.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years, correct?
Is your concern the equitable distribution of funding throughout the city?
When I look at the quality that Blackburn is getting and the quality that is at Ivy Crockett, yes. I don't think there's equity there.
I will say historically, the funding for Ivory Crockett has been pretty high. Ivory Crockett's about $90,000 per acre from 2003 to 2026, where Blackburn Park's only about $17,000 per acre for that same time frame. So because we use so many CDBG funds for, you know, a 15 to, well, over at least 15 years worth of funding, most parks do not get significant $15,000, $20,000 items placed into a park every single year like Ivory Crockett did for many years. It was put in piecemeal, correct. It wasn't done at one time, but it has had significant dollars put into it.
Well, I would like for us to consider, if nothing else, either take it out at 4.2 million we're gonna get and repair Ivy Crockett Park to the condition it needs to be in, or either divert some of the funds for this new park we want to buy, and thinking about $250,000 in it, and making Barbary Park acceptable. Ivy Crockett Park.
And there are funds in the park improvement fund. You know, again, we have at the end of the year, we'll have, you know, about 1.1 million. So all this
Why
could,
are we holding such a large balance?
the last few years, we haven't expensed much out of there because we've been saving funds for COVID, and we've delayed several projects that normally would have occurred. That's why that balance has gotten up to the 1.3 or so level that it's at now. We also paid off the bonds. Originally, when the park sales tax was approved, we took out bonds to fund Blackman Park renovation in around 2000, 2001. Those bonds were paid off fiscal year 18. So once those bonds were paid off, that freed up about $250,000 a year that we've been putting back into the parks as major CIP type projects.
So the money is there.
Yeah, the money's there. There's money there.
Have we ever thought of meeting with the neighborhood? Because what I'm hearing, I've heard tennis courts, I've heard walking path. What's the priority of the neighborhood? I mean, if you're going to take out the tennis courts, what would the neighbors like to see? Would this be useful to have another basketball court with a lower basketball net so that the kids could, I mean, that's to me, in the walking path, do people use it?
Yes.
So if they use it, then we should fix it. I mean, that's, it would be very nice, I think.
North Webster
Figure out
Neighborhood
what the
Coalition met on this last Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, last Thursday. And this was the focus of our meeting or their meeting. It's just the bad condition of Ivory.
Yeah,
Crockett
I know,
Park.
it's.
Especially when they see news clips on what they're doing to Blackburn Park.
I know it's the focus, and I think we all want to do something. I think it's doing what the neighbor would find most valuable.
So I think we can find the consensus of what the neighbors want without a problem. It's just that, are we willing to come forward and put the money
To take
get it
care of
done?
those things, yeah.
Well, can we just flop the priority and fix the walking path now? And then if we were to do community input on basketball courts, we just push that off to a
The
later
basketball
year?
courts are so
They're
bad,
terrible.
you can't even play on them.
They're terrible.
It's real bad.
They're really
So that would be okay, so you know you want to fix those?
It's the only full court basketball court we have in the city of Webster Groves, I believe.
Okay.
Outdoor, yes.
I maybe I'm not the
Okay,
right
I-
messenger for that,
No,
but.
correct, you're correct.
I suppose I was just thinking, do what we need now and do the community engagement later about any question marks. Where does it look like?
But
it's
both
the
of
way
those are
around?
used extensively.
It's the
The
tennis
best
court
walking
thing, I
court,
think.
the
Right, that's-
walking And the basketball.
And the
court.
basketball courts are terrible. They're really bad.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
We got volunteers from the audience.
They're doing Blackford Park right now, saving us $50,000 or $60,000 in that project. So
Who's doing black meat?
Public Works is doing the labor on Blackburn right now. So all the walking trails in Blackburn Park,
I think they do the trail.
they can.
He just
He
volunteered.
volunteered to do that,
Volunteered.
Emerson.
Great. I'm just saying, why wasn't that brought? It's okay.
Okay.
So
let's-
can I say one last thing?
Yes.
If we do the basketball court and the walking path up front, we could have some engagement about how to use the new space that we take out in the playground renovations and things like that. What are the
Yeah.
next steps involved?
Yeah, but if we could take care of those two pieces now, I think you'd probably find agreement with the council on doing the walking path and the basketball courts.
So we will move forward with walking path and the basketball courts, taking the money out of the park improvement fund. And then we will start a process to get community input on what to do with the tennis courts.
Yes.
You're gonna leave the pavilions for later.
Oh, yeah. I
Somebody
think-
could open mine.
How do you guys feel about CDBG funding going back to expensing this park? Or are you guys for that, or would you like to see that money continue to go towards community housing project renovations? In which case we would remove that line item out of there for $90,000 and reallocate that back into the park improvement fund as well.
Well, I think it's one thing doing it $15,000 at a time, but then taking the entirety of it one year. And, I actually did talk to the guy from the county. It's been several months now. I'm not even sure last year's CDBG money came through yet for the home improvement program.
Yeah, that funding source is nebulous on when it happens and how it happens. It's outside of my grasp.
How are you?
I would give it my best shot.
All right, Scott, you feel like you got what you needed on that one?
I do.
All right, let's keep going
Okay.
because we have one more left.
Got lots of stuff. Park operations, this is the other side of our park operations that is outside of the park improvement fund. This lives in the general fund. This is mainly maintenance of the parks and staff of the parks. So 360,000. It's about a 10% reduction for fiscal year 22 over the fiscal year 21 approved budget. So we are trying to reduce items and expenses there. Again, the biggest part of that is our salaries and benefits, and then contractual services at 29%. That is our mowing contract. We hire a mowing contractor to do about half of the parks, not the ball fields, not City Hall, but they mow a lot of our outlying right-of-way properties and various old house properties that the city has acquired, and the parks now is in charge of mowing.
So why is it $100,000 increase from FY19? 298 to 397. Like, I understand 20 is kind of like out the window at this point, right? Because it's hard to make a determination off of this past year, but going back to the most recent one in FY19, it's a big increase.
That is, we move different projects in and out of here. I'd have to go find that exact figure. Also, that's the actual number. We almost always come in below budget. Like for instance, right now I'm short 2 staff members, so that fee, that salary line item would come down. We get items like Public Works offering to do work for us instead of us going out and contracting it. If they're able to do tree work for us, for instance, they do a lot of tree work for us and things like that we see cost savings on. But we estimate or we budget for them not being able to do that if they've got other projects, their street projects and stuff that take higher priority. They help us out when they can. Recreation services. So this is kind of all things recreation. It's the recreation, the aquatic center, the ice rink, the fitness center, and for the first time, a full year budget of concessions. We took concession operations in-house last fall. Due to COVID, our previous contractor wasn't able to work for close to 6 months because there was nothing happening, and we weren't thrilled with their level of service anyway. So we decided to bring that in-house and do it ourselves. Total for all those expenses is about $2 million. That's 1.3 million in salaries. Year over year, we're going up about 4%. But again, that includes $100,000 for concession operations for the first time. And again, our cost recovery off of our fees for those same recreation services, we're estimating about 93% for next year, which is a quality rate, but I would like it to be closer to 100 where we normally live. And then there's the historical stuff. Businesses, oh, sorry, I skipped a page. Grants, again, this is our grant fund. Fiscal year 22, we got it 481,000. That's 475,000 for the new fitness studio on the front of the rec complex. And then there's about $8,000 in there to start the master plan process for the aquatic center, which we will get a planning grant for a portion of that master planning process. Business districts, again, this is park services doing landscaping, holiday decorations, and storm mitigation for the 3 business districts. We have 1 full-time staff member and a 75% part-time staff member in there. The business districts are funding this to 97%, which is a pretty good rate. This general fund does kick in the other 3%. And that doesn't include any of the capital expenses. So the city's general fund or CIP fund is buying the trucks and water and hoses and things of that nature. We're not charging the business districts back for those harder costs to allocate towards them. And finally is our capital improvement. So for fiscal year 22, we're looking at just over $500,000 for Parks and Recreation. It's just a little bit higher than last year's. I'm going to show you the CIP sheets from projects that are scheduled to happen in fiscal year 22, because I have a whole lot of CIP sheets. I don't want to show you all of them. So I'll show you just the ones that are happening in fiscal year 22. And then I do have a spreadsheet at the end that shows all 5 years worth. So the first one and probably the biggest is the aquatic center renovation. The pool was built in 1994, making it 27 years old this year. It is the oldest water aquatic center fun time pool in St. Louis County. Prior to ours, everything was just the square box pools that we all grew up with. This was the first one with slides and lazy river and such. It has lots of maintenance issues. It needs to be blown up and redone. So starting with the biggest date on the timeline would be a ballot issue in April of 24 for a no tax increase bond issue. Working back from that, fall of 23 into the spring of 24 would be informational campaign to the residents, letting them know the how and whys and dollars for that ballot issue. We'd like to do full construction documents, which would be about $300,000 in fiscal year 23. That will give us the full construction documents and hard cost estimates to be able to provide that information for the ballot issue. So that takes us back to this year being master plan. So the goal is to start our master plan program, go out for RFQs on that pretty soon here so that we can do that master planning late this summer when the pool is still open, so we can capture data from pool users as well as open houses to the public to find out what they're looking for in a new aquatic center. The bond issue passes April 24. We would put out construction bids. shortly thereafter, and we would start construction in August of 24. We would likely close the pool a week or two early when school session starts and not be open all the way through Labor Day. The beginning of pool seasons are much more heavily used than the end of pool seasons, and capturing 2 or 3 weeks of summertime construction schedule would be vital to being able to get that pool open for Memorial Day weekend in 2025. Total cost for this project is just over $6 million estimated. I estimate that the actual construction will be about $5.5 million. We'll be able to get at least one, if not two, mini park grants for about $500,000 each on that, lowering our bond cost to somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. Typically, if you can get that just under $5 million, you get better finance rates. So we might look to shave some dollars to get that just under that $5 million mark for the bond issue.
Scott, will we solicit participation from Rock Hill?
Yes. So as part of the freestyle pass that we're doing now, we will be capturing some data off the back of that pass from users, and we will also continue to talk to Rock Hill and any other neighbors that we might have if they would like to join a cooperative to help fund the renovation of the pool and to provide participation for their residents. There are several municipalities in the region that do that with aquatic centers and other recreation facilities.
We'll start that process soon.
They'd be part of this master planning process. They would certainly be invited to that starting this summer.
Okay, great, thanks.
Aquatic center hot water heater. This hot water heater is original to the building, so it'll also be 27 years old this year. It's worked great for us, but it needs to be replaced. A little over $50,000. We would be able to reuse this in the new construction or in the new pool. We plan on keeping the pool bathhouse that's there and adding to it and making it nicer, but keeping that structure because the structure is still in good shape. Flooring, big ticket item for flooring in fiscal year 21 is all the rubber flooring in the ice rink. It's approximately 25 years old. If you've been down there, we have water issues underneath that floor. It's bubbling up. It's also just 25 years old with skates on it all day long. So it's quite cut up and the sheen off the top is gone. So it's tough to keep clean. It needs to be replaced. But that is a big ticket. It's $270,000 for the lobby and the walkway all the way down the ice rink into the locker rooms and all the way around both sides of the ice rink. We'll also in fiscal year 22 sand and refinish the gymnasium floor. We do that about every 12 years and we recoat it every 2 years in between those full sand and refinish. So we're ready for that. And then in fiscal year 23 would be all new tile over in the meeting room areas down the hallway into the kitchen and restrooms. Yep.
We'll move on to that. I have a concern. I mean, putting all this new flooring down, and then I think you had replace the roof. 2026. So the roof, based on your description, the roof is leaking.
The roof leaked this year during snow. The roof is not leaking every rainstorm or anything like that. We plan for these replacements to start 5 years out and work its way forward. That roof is in good shape for the next 5 years. It will have some maintenance on it, but it will not require a full replacement value until that fiscal year 26, unless something crazy happens between now and then. We had a pretty significant leak this year, but it's very rare that you have 2 weeks of sub 20-degree weather with 6 inches of snow like we did this year in St. Louis. So because of that, the way flat roofs work is you've only got an opening about 1 foot wide, about 4 inches tall, where water falls off of those flat roofs and goes into a gutter system. When it's that cold and you have that much snow, oftentimes you'll get an ice dam that blocks that exit point for the water. And since it's a flat roof, the water just sits there and kind of backs up. So what happens is the water finds new entry points, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches up off of the actual roof and comes into the building. We found that, we repaired it. It $2,000 repair or something like that, maybe. And that included replacing the ceiling tiles and all that stuff. We might have another one or two of those if we have crazy snows between now and then, but there's no reason to spend the $200,000 next year to replace that roof.
Well, I was just going by your justification. The roof is original to the building, is showing strong sign of wear and tear. Leaks are becoming more common throughout the facility.
Correct. It is showing strong signs of wear, but it's 25 years old. It should show 25, signs of wear, but
And it's
we're still in good shape for the next 5 or 6 years.
They all are showing signs of. wear.
Yeah. Cardio equipment. Originally, cardio equipment was scheduled to be replaced this year. We pushed it originally because we weren't using fitness equipment as much due to COVID shutdowns. We also had a higher priority with our Zamboni engine that blew up. So we brought the Zamboni out of fiscal year 22 into our current year and then pushed fitness cardio equipment back. We think that we can still push some of that back even farther to reduce expenses in fiscal year 22. We normally buy equipment every 3 years. It's on a 3-year parts and labor warranty. So we're out of warranty now. We'd like to keep some funds in there in fiscal year 22 because we have a few pieces that have maintenance issues. If we don't replace them, there will be operating expenses to do repairs of those. For instance, a treadmill, deck, and belt is about $1,000. We've got 12 treadmills. So if a couple of those go out, then we're hitting significant dollars. It makes sense to go ahead and replace some of those pieces that are wearing down with new pieces as opposed to paying those operating costs. And then we'd replace the bulk of them in fiscal year 23. That also moved this next 160,000 back that was scheduled for fiscal year 25, now slides back to 26. So we stay on that 3-year rotation.
So the 50 is just like a Band-Aid in this 2022.
Yes, sir. And it will likely come in less than that 50. With bids that come in and with equipment that we think we'll need to bid out and repair. We might be able to get that down in the $30,000 range, but we haven't gone out for bid on it yet. So
What's our average daily attendance usage of the cardio room right now?
ooh, I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Is it low?
It's low. It is trending back up. I mean, for a while I was tracking the numbers and it was 20 people a day, the whole day. Those numbers have certainly increased. I don't have a recent tracking number for you. I can certainly pull that information and send it to you all in the next day or so.
The only reason I ask that is because I'm just interested, like, is this something that can even be pushed out to 23 as well? Because I just question throughout this next fiscal year, whether we'll actually get to full capacity sufficient that we actually need every equipment piece working properly, or if we can pull some out and wait till 23.
From what most of people in my field are feeling, we see a big comeback this fall. Summertime is a down attendance time for us because people have the option to go walk outside and do things like that. When the weather starts getting colder, we always ramp up and have a higher attendance. Hopefully we've got a better hand on vaccinations and the whole COVID thing so that people will be coming back. Will we be back to 100%? No. 90%. I think that's probably a good choice for this fall. I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that's a good number. That's just a best guess.
How many more?
Just a couple.
Because we have more.
I know. Yes, ma'am. I got a lot of stuff.
We're looking forward to, Mark, don't worry.
Ice rink, hot water storage.
Talk fast.
Talk fast. Hot water storage. We got a hot water tank that we replaced a couple years ago, but we didn't replace these actual storage tanks that hold the hot water. $37,000. Ball field groomer. This grooms all the baseball infields. It's 14 years old. We can replace this one for about $25,000, the same piece. We're looking to upgrade to a piece that'll be about $35,000, but it comes with the ability to laser level all of our ball fields, which will save us $5,000 to $10,000 in operating expense every year. That's a good expense of money. Larson Park Tennis, Councilwoman Arnold asked about that earlier. This is a Larson Tennis Court project. It was originally in fiscal year 18. We punted on it a couple different times to get through the Memorial Tennis Project. And here we are. This is our only AstroTurf courts. It's a slower play for those who might play a little slower or have knee issues or ankle issues and such. Like the way I phrased that. It is, it's failing at the seams. You can't really see it from this picture, but the various pieces of carpet are separating at the seams. So it's becoming a safety issue and really needs to be replaced. We will replace it with another turf court. That's what the users have asked for that use that particular court system. And then out in the end, 26 is Barnacle Park tennis courts, mill and overlay of those courts. Park utility cart. This replaces a cart at Blackburn Park. That's 19 years old at the time of replacement. We use that to clean trash and bathrooms and such. And then here's our total CIP spreadsheet. I know that's tough to read, but that saved you about 30 more sheets of paper and slides. So total CIP, all of my capital expenses on a 5-year plan is just over $9 million with all the things I showed you tonight and the next 4 years.
So this is a piece of that we should all have. That would be very nice for you to share that with all of us.
I certainly
On
will.
one page.
Yes, ma'am.
9 fire trucks.
And half of that's the pool, though, right?
Half of that, more than half of that is this one.
Half the pool.
Yeah. 6
Okay,
million.
are there any questions for Scott?
You get mad at me there if I did ask a question?
Pardon me? All right. Thank you, Scott,
Thank
for
you,
that
Dawn.
lovely detailed presentation. We are taking a 5-minute break. So anyhow, thank you. I hope you don't mind that we sort of pushed you along here, you know. But we have Mara next. And so Mara is here tonight to tell us about her department.
So planning development, gonna be short and sweet. Our budget is primarily, as some others have said, is staff. So you can see here, the primary bulk of our budget is our salaries with some part-time and some overtime and our benefits. We did request a new permit technician. And then you had already previously approved, we will have, which will be new to this budget year, a new inspector. That inspector will help us. Currently, in the past couple of years, we could call for an inspection and have it within 24 hours. We're now at 2 to 2.5 days, sometimes out to get inspections, just because we are that busy. So we've been utilizing a part-time inspector. This will help us to get back to sort of the timing that we used to do, which was essentially like a 24-hour phone call for an inspection. The admin part-time staff will help us. Oh, sorry, we also have admin part-time staff in here in addition to the permit technician. Wow, that went really loud. Permit technician is to help process permits, to get them in and out, to help us with phone calls and to schedule inspections. So we have all of that moving forward. Our materials and supplies, whopping $6,210. Office supplies, gas for the vehicles, some basic personnel equipment, hardware and hand tools. Our contractual services, this is where I get to pay for mosquito, adulticide, and larvicide services. I also, we have a lot of training and memberships. As you heard before, the ISO for the insurance rating, we are actually pretty integral into what the insurance rating is for the city because it depends on how our inspectors are certified, how they're registered, which architects we have, you know, those kinds of certifications. So a lot of that comes into our meetings and conferences, some of our memberships, and our various training and education. And then I can go to our 3 taxing districts. Anything else from planning? Because that was it. Those 2 slides. That was me. Any planning questions?
I just did. What is the 1/5/26? What is that?
my, under fiscal year 2022.
Oh, that's our account. That's the account we're under. I use account numbers a lot because I
Okay.
have lots of
Okay.
accounts that I have to keep track of.
Got it.
So that's just our account number.
Totally makes sense.
Sorry. That's my planning and development account.
Okay.
And see 120550, that's,
Yeah.
yeah. So Old Webster Taxing District, they have, yeah.
If you're gonna hire new folks, are you gonna need another vehicle?
Well, that's what we were doing. So Public Works already had a vehicle from last year that we're getting this year. We are not going to sell our vehicle. We're going to keep the old vehicle and get one new vehicle, and that covers us.
Okay.
Yep. Trying to use old things.
So we had kind of a side conversation earlier, so I'll ask this.
Sorry, microphone.
So I'll ask it now. If we start turning over these inspections more quickly, then the revenue comes in more quickly. So that might in at least part pay for this.
It's not that the revenue is going to come in more quickly. We do need to. So the last time we did a fees increase was in 2012. We usually do the fee increase when we adopt the building code. This year, because we adopted the building code right around the time that COVID hit, we decided not to do a fee increase and not to address fees. We did go back because our new permitting system helps us identify how many inspections we actually did much more clearly than we have in the past. We've identified that if we actually charge for every inspection that we did, we probably would have had an additional $44,000. Typically what happens is when someone pulls a permit, we identify how many inspections they need. But if they fail an inspection multiple times, or if they decide to do it as partial inspections, they're doing a house and they say, well, we only want you to come in and inspect the first floor. We haven't done the drywall yet on the second floor. Some of these are expanding out and we don't necessarily go back and charge them for those additional inspections because it hadn't been a policy in the past. So we do want to look at that because we think that if we have a better way of tracking, we can stop and say, we can't do any more inspections. You've exceeded your number of inspections.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. That could hopefully cover a large portion of the salary of a new inspector. I also have the 3 taxing districts. So Old Webster Special Taxing District. We do, as Scott already told you, a $40,950 transfer out for the park services, plants and materials. But then their main part of their budget is $55,620. Couple highlights, they are replacing trash cans and they're continuing their building lighting program. Big exciting things with us in these tax districts. But as you can see, they identify probably their biggest thing is advertising. For all of them, that helps for their special events, for their ads in the Webster Kirkwood Times, for their businesses and social media, both for the holiday season and then year round. Do you know part of the advertising does get bulked together? All 3 districts pay and the city puts an additional amount in, and we use that for social media services. Old Orchard Special Taxing District, same thing, $34,986 transferred out for park services, plants and materials. Rest of their project is, rest of their funding is $36,400 that they plan to spend. Highlights for them, more trash cans and a new facade program. They did add that in last year and they haven't been able to do it yet. This morning, we actually talked with them about what they want to have as their facade requirements. They hadn't even gotten to that part because everyone was so concerned when everything was shutting down. Crossroads Special Taxing District, the smallest one, transfer out to parks, $22,678, materials, plants. They have a really tiny budget. They're going to be spending about $10,500, but even that, they usually don't spend all of it. Their biggest thing right now is really the focus of asking the council to keep the streetscape in if you can. That's the CIP that is with the Parks Department, Public Works Department. I have no CIP sheets. I'm kind of done. Those were my 5 slides.
There's no pictures of the new trash cans?
No pictures of trash cans. I know normally I have pictures of houses and projects and plans. Yeah, I kept it simple. I knew I was going to be last and you guys would be kind of tired and done.
Who, us?
So questions or comments?
Thank you for your thoughtfulness. Anita.
Okay, I don't know if there are some comments that people want to leave as we leave tonight, or whether this is something that merits a discussion, a further discussion when we're all a little more fresher.
Well, generally speaking, I was just talking to Todd and I said I did think it was really much, I liked the presentation where everyone did their whole presentation as a block, and it helps me separate what was happening a lot more easily, so.
Great.
I did enjoy reading each department's goals, for the same question.
Yeah, the year-end
Yes.
summary.
Just-
Yes.
I thought that was good.
Yes.
Good.
Excellent.
And I would just say, like, you know, having been on council now for 3 years, I think this is our third budget cycle. I actually start feeling confident or comfortable understanding this document better. It takes a long time.
Yeah, it does.
It takes
Yeah.
a long time. I won't tell you which one this is for me, but
Yeah.
it's, you know, you still find stuff in here, and this is why.
So will we be getting revised books?
So you will, at some point, not, you will at some points, absolutely. So we can all refer to them over the year but not to be pushy, and we are all tired this evening, but we are going to need some answers or some guidance from you all soon. As Marlene shared, she and her staff are scratching out stone tablets, and it takes a long time. And so we need some direction. We would like to know your guidance on particularly the general fund items. The CIP is certainly important, as well as the others. But with the general fund, where do you want to go with salaries? What salary scenarios would you like to see? Or are you happy with status quo? That is fine as well. But we need to know where you want to go so her staff can put together the scenarios, get it back to you, and so that we can do, sorry, I should have the calendar in front of me and I don't, but we have to post for the budget notifications and all of that. So there's quite a bit of work that needs to go. So I will be bothering you all for.
I wonder if we should put something on the next meeting. We have a meeting next Tuesday, perhaps at the work session. We could provide a time, even, you know, a half an hour, that people can start to think about what they learned here, what their concerns are, what they, and let's do that, because that might be a good interim step. In the meantime, I think you've heard some things. I mean, some of us have lists of things that could go into the $4.2 million general budget. And maybe we start to think about that and provide that for you also, because that might help with this budget if we can pull some of these items out of here and put them into that $4.2 million.
They don't in terms of the shortfall, because all of those items were mostly in the CIP.
Right, exactly.
So we certainly, and Eric and I both were taking notes. And so I think we've got a pretty good list of potential items for you all to decide on in terms of the ARP funding. If we are not, and I don't mean to say we're not concerned, because I know any shortfall is a concern, but knowing that we have the recovery funds coming, knowing that the reserves are healthy, if trying to reduce that shortfall is not an immediate priority, then I think we have a good place to go from here. If you all wanted to make $500,000 in reductions to the shortfall, or to that's a different story.
So my concern about that is the increasing, you know, if the shortfall is really related to salaries, we are simply postponing the inevitable.
Yes.
And so I think I would like to see some alternative salary things, including, you know, what does it look like if we do the 2% COLA and hold the 1.5 and make a decision on that later?
Some of that I can answer now, and we'll be.
I am really frankly too tired to process it. So
I'll send you home with the spreadsheet.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. I'm with you, because I think so much of the shortfall is in operating, it's in the operating budget, and it'll just carry through next year. I mean, it's not stuff that, and the end of 2019, I think our reserve fund has dropped by $3.1 million. And we have that 50% fiscal thing that we passed. So it all makes me nervous. I think it's too much, too big of a budget deficit. At least I think so.
So even that amount of conversation is helpful because that provides us with some direction of where to go. So there's only two columns you really need to pay attention to on the spreadsheet. The no 2% July. So the proposed budget, there's three highlighted ones. Proposed budget is as is. It includes the 2% and the steps. That next column, the no 2%. The bottom 114,680 is what that savings would be. And then the next column is the with the 2% July increase, but no 1.5% January shows what the savings would be. But what you need to understand is that the step is still included in that with the 2% July, but no 1.5%, the steps are still already built in because they are part of the scheduled plan. So we can talk about it more. If you have questions, call me, email me. And we can set up some individual time if you would like, but otherwise, Mayor, we'll certainly have the discussion.
Let's
at
have the
council meeting.
discussion on, and I don't want to scare the chief here, but I'm curious as what would the number be accounted for in the steps? And please don't read anything into that. I just want to see what that number is. Because it helps us think about year over year over year. If we're doing this for 9 years, we need to figure out how we're going to get it done.
And when you said chief, and we're signaling out that chief, but do you want that for fire as well?
Yes.
Because they have different, the chiefs. Because I think police is 9 years and fire's 8.
Correct.
So there's nothing easy with this.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing that most concerns me at least is like looking back now and thinking, well, did we not see this coming kind of thing? And that's the thing that kind of like, and so okay, now we see it coming. What can we do to prevent falling off the cliffs, so to speak, year in over year in?
Yeah, I have my list of things where I found, the rather substantial increases, and it really just makes me nervous because if we're running 2.3 this year, we'll run 2.3 next year because there's no new revenue source.
And that is the rub. That is the really scary part. We don't have increasing revenues. And so that's an issue. Our costs are going to continue to go up in terms of personnel. Just again, a service organization, we have people. If you have those questions, Mayor, if you could email them, that would give Marlene and I time to get the answers for the council meeting. And any of you, that was an invitation to please email your questions so we can dig into them and get you some answers.
The compensation already doing, would that affect, make that a part of what we need to do in the next steps whenever we get the results back?
Yes.
Compensation, so.
Yes, it will. It will, absolutely. So, and what we'll do when you guys ask questions, Marlene, and as I said, we'll dig into the answer, but we'll circulate the responses. So if Councilman Franklin asks a question, instead of just responding to him, we will circulate, put them in a kind of an FAQ format and circulate the question and answer to each of you. Okay, thank you so much for your time. I know it was a late night, and thank you to all the directors.
Yeah.
And Mara gets an extra.
Mara wears 2 hats. Always, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. For you, Emerson.